Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience this evening. The council voted to enter into session earlier today at 6:30 p.m. And we are now returning from a closed session where we met with the city's labor attorney to receive a briefing on and legal advice on upcoming collective bargaining negotiations with ASME Local 3399 and UFCW Local 400. The meeting was closed pursuant to Annotated Code of Maryland General Provisions Article 3-305B9, which permits a meeting to be closed to discuss matters related to collective bargaining negotiations, and 3-305B7, which permits a meeting to be closed to consult with counsel to receive legal advice. And so we are now reconvening in the auditorium for our regular meeting. In terms of upcoming agenda, tonight, our voting sessions consist of 4 items. The first is a resolution appointing David Alberto Fernandez as the Poet Laureate. And then the next voting item is a single reading ordinance approving procurement of 2 public works vehicles, followed by a single reading ordinance approving procurement of a leaf vacuum. And then a single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Avio Inc. for stop sign cameras. We have a presentation this evening from the Community Quality of Life Grant Reports. Our Grants Review Committee is here for the annual report. And then we have 3 work session items this evening. The first is the Community Connectors Program update, followed by code amendment, use of city seal or logo. And then we are continuing our conversation from last week on options to address noise ordinance requirements. In terms of upcoming agendas, on Wednesday, October the 22nd, the City Council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. We will have a proclamation recognizing Economic Development Week. We will have presentations, the 2024 election report, the interim report of the Council Compensation Committee, and then the Housing and Community Development Annual Report. We will also have a voting session, which is the first reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code regarding the use of seals or logos. As a reminder, Saturday, October the 25th is Monster Bash. And on Wednesday, October the 29th, the City Council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. Right now, we have 3 voting items. The first is the second reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code regarding the use of city seal or logos. We're tentatively slated for a resolution setting a path forward for the Community Connectors Program. Also tentatively slated for a resolution setting forth next steps to comply with the noise ordinance requirements. We will also have 2 work sessions that evening. The first is a discussion of legislative priorities, and the second is a contract for rent stabilization study. On Friday, October the 31st, is Halloween, and so we would definitely have lots of opportunities to engage with the community towards the end of the month. And so with that, we're going to move to public comments on voting items. Do we have any public comments on voting items? Is again a resolution appointing our Poet Laureate, David Alberto Fernandez, a single reading ordinance approving procurement of 2 public works vehicles, a single reading ordinance approving procurement of a leaf vacuum, and a single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Avio Inc. for stop sign cameras. Do we have any public comments on voting items? Okay, seeing none. Do we have any virtual public comments this evening? Not on voting items. Great. Okay, so with that, do we have any general public comments this evening?
Okay, so I'm Elizabeth Wallace, Ward 1. I haven't made a public comment here in a few months. I've been remiss. However, 4 days ago, I read a piece by Melissa Kirch in the New York Times. The title was Following Through. It spurred me to come today. It's about the importance of showing up, even if it's a drag. The ultimate goal in keeping plans is creating community, a necessary component we've reminded ourselves over and over to happiness and longevity, and this may involve giving up some control of our time in the short term in the interest of giving our lives meaning in the long run. We chafe at relationships that feel like obligations, but Brad Stulberg wrote, if we commit to certain people and activities, if we feel an obligation to show up for them, then it's likely that we will indeed show up. And showing up repeatedly is what creates community. Making plans, Ms. Kirsch says, and then actually showing up, even if we're spent or cranky, is a simple way of acting with integrity. There's so much that's unsteady in the world, so much that feels inconstant, and being a dependable presence, keeping our word and our plans is a small but indisputable way of resisting that. I commend, for example, the City Council for showing up every week, the 300 people who showed up for Tacoma mobilization, concerned about ICE in our city, and the 30 or so kids and adults who made public comments to save the Piney Branch Elementary School. However, for weeks and months before that, fewer than a dozen, really only a familiar handful, have shown up here in front of the City Council to demand that our city has a foundation to do what Tacoma Park residents somehow think is a sure thing here. Unfortunately, there's evidence that their civil rights of at least one of our city employees were not respected, not by ICE, but by her fellow police department coworker. And despite the fact we demand transparency of our heads of state, there's enough evidence to warrant a lawsuit being filed for possible violation by our own City Council of the Maryland Open Meetings Act. There's evidence that at least one request filed under the Maryland Public Information Act was not responded to within the 30-day period required by law. So I'm here to say, though spent and a little cranky, we as a community need to show up more for the mundane tasks, to watch the day-to-day goings-on of city government, to make sure it holds us all in good stead for the rocky road, not just ahead, but the one we are as a nation are already on. So inspect what you expect. Come on down to Tacoma Park. There are plenty of seats here. Let's make sure we're walking in the correct direction together.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Arthur David Olson, Ward 4, Herbie Hancock Avenue. One last budget idea that doesn't involve staff or program cuts. Imagine you're setting up a college fund for a newborn. If you're sufficiently self-aware to know that you're an erratic saver, you'll have extra money in the fund so that things don't go awry in the years when you don't save enough. But if you know yourself to be a steady saver, you don't need that extra money. Which brings us to the city's Equipment Replacement Reserve, or ERR. As the Public Works head noted last week, there have been recent years where the city did not fully fund the reserve. So much so that a financial forecast a few years back projected that, if things continued without change, the fund would be exhausted by 2030. The good news is that things have changed. The reserve was fully funded in the last fiscal year and is budgeted to be fully funded in the current fiscal year. If full funding continues, the reserve is on firm footing for the foreseeable future. While that's a big if the city is now ready to be a steady saver, it may no longer need extra money in the ERR. Now, it's notoriously hard for the city to save money, as witness the ongoing anxiety about the adequacy of unassigned reserves. So it's best not to spend the extra money in the ERR. The best course is to transfer the money to the pension fund. This will reduce the unfunded liability. That, in turn, will reduce the annual additions the city must make to the fund. Roughly speaking, each $100,000 added to the pension fund reduces the annual additions for future years by about $6,000. In the long run, money in the pension fund yields higher returns than money kept elsewhere. While the higher returns come with higher risk, the city's pension board has done an excellent job of managing that risk in recent years, excuse me. Happily, the transfer need not wait until the crunch of budget season. Now's the time for the City Council to direct the city manager to transfer extra funds from the Equipment Replacement Reserve to the pension fund. And I do have numbers backing up the statement that we're on firm footing. These are attached to the written version of my comments, which are available from the city clerk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Good evening, council. Good evening, neighbors. My name's Daniel Adams. I'm a volunteer and currently the board chair of Meals on Wheels of Tacoma Park. It's a privilege to be here tonight with the city council and community members who are concerned about the issues confronting Tacoma Park residents, especially our collective efforts to reduce food insecurity. On behalf of Meals on Wheels, we are grateful to the city of Tacoma Park for your repeated stalwart funding of our program. From Food Insecurity Reduction Grant to the extension of the Community Quality Bridge Grant until June 2026, your generosity has enabled us to serve many of your homebound neighbors. Those residents include the elderly, individuals living with disabilities, those undergoing treatment for cancer, people who are immunocompromised, people who are recovering from surgery or illness. Thank you. Our clients represent all income levels and are found in every type of neighborhood. Each weekday, we deliver 2 freshly made, healthy meals to homebound Tacoma Park residents who cannot shop or safely prepare for food on their own. How do we do this? With one kitchen, 236 amazing volunteers contributing over 12,000 hours, preparing over 54,000 meals, serving 216 homebound neighbors, 94% of those neighbors feeling safer and better cared for because of our program. Meals on Wheels has better food than anything you can get on Grubhub or Uber Eats or whatever app. But there are only 2 ways to get our food. You can be a client, or you can come volunteer with us, www.mounttacoma.org. Council, what you are funding, our volunteers may be the only human contact for a client that day or that week. We check on neighbors' well-being. We follow up with our clients' needs, including organizations offering complimentary services that we don't offer. And this healthy food that you are funding reduces their time and cost in the hospital. I cannot stress the following enough. Eating is not optional. The recently released Capital Area Food Bank 2025 Hunger Report paints a bleak picture of hunger in the DMV. 35% of Montgomery County residents are food insecure, an 8% increase over 2023. Cuts in federal and social services for seniors and disabilities is having a disproportionate effect on Meals on Wheels, and inflationary pressures are affecting our costs as well. And despite all that discouraging news, I'm optimistic. Why? Because Tacoma Park is a community with a generous heart, and from our elected leaders or business community, our nonprofit and faith communities, we come together in challenging times, and Meals on Wheels looks forward to collaborating with all the stakeholders to meet the moment to reduce food insecurity for our homebound adults. Thank you for your time this evening. That's 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other general public comments? Okay. Do we have any virtual public comments? Okay. All right. We're going to move to council comments. Do we have any council comments this evening? Actually, nope, I'm not. I'm sorry. We are. I was supposed to do a little bit of a tweak to the schedule so that we could hear from our new poet laureate. So we're going to break up our voting session this evening. And so we're going to have our first voting session related to the resolution appointing David Alberto Fernandez as the Poet Laureate. And so before we call the vote, I would like to ask David to come up to be introduced and to share some of your work.
Hi, I'm Arts and Humanities Manager Brendan Smith, and I'm happy to welcome and introduce David Alberto Fernandez as our next Tacoma Park Poet Laureate. City Subcommittee reviewed applications from local poets and then forwarded their recommendation for Fernandez to the Tacoma Park Arts and Humanities Committee, which unanimously recommended his appointment by the City Council. David is, well, let me back up. Established in 2005, the Tacoma Park Poet Laureate Program honors the achievements of a local poet who serves as the city's ambassador in promoting public appreciation of poetry and supporting a creative community of local poets. The Poet Laureate proposes and leads city-sponsored projects to promote poetry in Tacoma Park, as well as reading their poetry at some public events, like this one, and serving as MC at poetry readings. David's been a librarian at the Library of Congress for 15 years. He's also associate editor of Beltway Poetry Quarterly, so I'd like to welcome him to read a few of his poems.
Thank you, Brendan. Mayor Searcy, commissioners, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm David Alberto Fernandez. I live on Boyd Avenue between the Co-op and the old hospital. As you know, this is a very, very challenging time, a dangerous time for our country. And I try to write poetry that addresses that. My poetry is bilingual. I write in Spanish and in English. So I'm going to give you 3 short ones just to get us going. The first one covers sort of like where we are at this moment, at this precarious moment. It's called El Consumiendo. So I give you a little bit in Spanish and a little bit in English. El Consumiendo. Nuestra realidad no se ve en noticias ni en pantallas intermitentes. Our reality doesn't appear on the news nor on flashing screens. Calles llenos de bolsas plásticas, botellas, ingenios. Streets filled with plastic bags, bottles without genies. Es verdad, manipulamos oportunidad. Nos hacemos flexibles y líquidos, escapándonos por momentos discretos del ojo que ve todo. True, we manipulate opportunities. We make ourselves flexible and liquid, escaping for discrete moments from the all-seeing eye. Pero esto no cambia de nada la relación debajo de todo, lo de ser consumido. But that does not change the relationship underlying it all, that of being consumed. Thank you. And this sort of refers to our community, valor intrínseco, intrinsic value. Por la calle es un placer ver valor intrínseco. Down the street, it's a pleasure to see intrinsic value. Semillas brotan, hierbas sin cortar, aves silvestres comiendo, niños jugando, todos ahí presentes. Seeds that sprout, random lawns uncut, wild birds feeding, kids at play, all there. Orgullo en la piel humana, invisible a las miradas tóxicas, completo en sí mismo. Pride in human skin, unseen by toxic gazes, complete in itself. Mosaico de piedras espejadas, ya bien alumbradas, reflejándose, brillándose brillante sobre sí mismas. Mirrored mosaic of shining stones, shining back bright upon themselves. And finally, this is sort of what we're up against, the people who don't like communities such as ours. This one's called Paisajismo Total de 4 Estaciones, 4 Seasons Total Landscaping. Ellos insisten que todos nos montamos en escaleras mecánicas tan doradas, presumidas, que nos lleven abajo hasta estacionamientos sin ninguna salida. They urge us all to ride down golden escalators to dead-end parking lots. Aduladores, mentirosos, mejores personas que el dinero puede comprar. Sycophants, liars, the best people money can buy. Siempre puliendo la fachada de una torre blanca cuyas raíces se extienden firmes dentro de los vertederos rancios de la basura. And they polish the facade of a white tower whose roots extend firmly into rank
garbage landfills. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Tacoma Park has always been an activist community. And in terms of activism, it isn't just addressing the problems, fighting the injustices. It's also celebrating who we are, celebrando nosotros, celebrating ourselves. And that's something that as Poet Laureate, I hope to do. So thank you for the opportunity of celebrating with you all, and let's go.
Well, thank you so much. We are honored to have you serve our community in this way and to be from the community. And I definitely look forward to hearing more of the wonderful poetry that you will provide our community.
Thank you.
So would someone like to move the resolution? Councilmember DeBala, do I have a second? Thank you, Councilmember Hanzak, for seconding. All those in favor of the resolution appointing David Alberto Fernandez as Poet Laureate, please say aye.
Aye.
Do you have any opposed? Any abstain? Moves forward. Congratulations. Thank you so much for your service. So we're going to go back to our regular schedule. So the council comments. Do we have any council comments this evening? Okay. Councilmember Landman.
Wow, that's a hard act to follow,
It is.
and mine will be monolingual. I want to encourage everyone to visit the Tacoma Park Presbyterian Church's annual bazaar this Saturday from 9 to 3 at 310 Tulip Avenue. It's one of the highlights of the season because it's an opportunity to reuse and recycle and contribute with your donations and your recycling of other people's donations to charities. So I hope to see you there. I also wanted to say how pleased I was, and I'm sure everybody on the council shares in our happiness to see that Piney Branch Elementary School did make it onto the plan for replacement. And I want to thank the mayor and everybody on the council who worked so hard on that, Councilmember Westlake, and all the members of the community who also contributed their time and effort to making sure that that happened, and that the pool and the gymnasium were on the list as part of the plan. So our work is not done, and we're going to be having lots more effort needed to make sure that it stays on the list as the Board of Education and the County Council and so forth weigh in on the budget. But it's just so exciting to see that our community's efforts were honored. So thank you to everybody who worked on that. And the last thing I wanted to mention was that there's still time if you're interested to apply for a grant from the Tacoma Foundation. That process is still open until November 7th. So those of you in the community who might be looking for a little more support for your good works, there's still an opportunity. Thank you. And I want to thank Ms. Wallace for your comments. Duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Hanzak.
Thank you. I too would like to thank Ms. Wallace, Mr. David, Mr. Adams, and definitely our Poet Laureate. Bienvenidos. Gracias para celebrar con nosotros. It's really wonderful to be able to start a long council meeting with words that ground us and really root us in who we are. And Ms. Wallace, I also really appreciated your reminder of the importance of keeping us true and trying our very best to be transparent, democratic, and encouraging all of us to engage as well as we can. And I appreciate you for acknowledging, and for you showing up, but for acknowledging all of us who do show up and are trying our very best. And I know lots of people would like to be here. I was going to recognize 2 French exchange students who were here with us this evening. This is also one of the joys of living in our community. I just thought I would, I ran across a statistic earlier this week. It showed me that 40% of Ward 5 residents were born in another country. And it's a pretty profound statistic. It's huge, right? And I'm sure it's pretty big for the whole city. I just don't have it at my fingertips. But you know, seeing their faces here in the audience and letting them hear from our poet laureate, no less, which was, you know, I forgot that they were going to get to hear that tonight, was probably the best thing that could happen. They're going to go home and tell their families that that's what happens in a small town in America. If only that was happening in every town in America, right? Anyway, so thank you. And one more thing. This Friday night, October 17th, is the Long Branch Outdoor Movie Night, so I hope some of you guys will be able to come out and join us for that. Thank you. I don't have it at my fingertips, I'm sorry, but it's on my calendar.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Wesselek.
Thank you. Thanks all for the comments and contributions tonight. I especially want to thank Mr. Adams for highlighting Meals on Wheels. It's a great organization right in Ward 6 on New Hampshire Avenue. So I hope if folks are able to volunteer and help out that they find the ways to do so. Piggybacking on what Councilmember Landman said, I'm also very excited to pour over the Montgomery County Capital Improvement Project Plan. I just want to lift out one thing that I know it includes plans for more down county holding schools, which was something that was really important to me and a lot of the public. Even if our children can't benefit, to have more holding schools closer to us is really, really necessary for the future that MCPS is trying to build. So I'm happy about that. And third, I want to share that today, this afternoon, I was at the Transportation Planning Board meeting at the Council of Governments downtown. We were planning to vote on a resolution that there had been a lot of contention around, I guess, and it was about whether or not to include a plan for 495 toll lanes in our upcoming Vision 2050 plan. And basically, these toll lanes were going to start in Virginia and end in Prince George's County, and Virginia was the only party backing it. So. But thankfully, at the last minute, I think literally today, there were negotiations and some consensus was made. So the TPP unanimously voted to put forward the plan that did not include the 495 express lanes, but did add a provision expecting reporting from the Virginia Department of Transportation next year about how they are continuing to work forward to improve that corridor and how they are working with the relevant jurisdictions to do that. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Wesselek. Councilmember Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the comments, Ms. Wallace, Mr. Adams. Thank you for all the work you do. Really appreciate that selfless dedication to other people. It's very heartwarming. I wasn't planning on saying anything tonight, but I looked in the gallery and I saw 2 young men who were sitting out there who came up underneath me a few years behind me, grew up on Maple Avenue, and it just reminded me of the importance, Rob and Eric, of affordable housing and what it meant to us. And I know we're going to be having conversations coming up soon about some changes to our affordable housing laws, and I encourage you guys to listen out and pay attention to what those changes could mean for our community. I know I've had some discussions with some of my colleagues about tenant opportunity to purchase law, and what that could mean, or what it has meant over the course of a couple of decades to the decrease in affordable housing in our city. We've lost a large number of affordable housing units, and I look forward to conversations to see how we can level that out and slow down the loss and maybe create some more affordable housing. But good to see you two guys, and thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, very briefly. Thank you, Meals on Wheels. Ward 2 people really like you. And to the Poet Laureate, I thought the three pieces went really well together. And I really liked the part about the mosaics, because we have on our library, as apparently you know. Yeah, so I thought that was great. But what I wanted to say was that several of us went to Deep Creek Lake to be with 350 local officials from across Maryland, which was pretty astounding. I have a couple of takeaways that I want to share with the rest of the council. One of them was a talk that was given by a city manager from Ferris, Texas. Yeah, who very straightforward, practical advice about the role of the city's management, the role of the council, and what's not the role. Because it's easy for us to listen to whoever's got the problem today and to forget that we want to be stewards for the future. I'm trying to find out if they have that, if they recorded it, so I can share it with the rest of our council members. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Schlegel?
Thank you. I'll just be brief. That it was a great opening to the evening with people demonstrating many ways to be involved. As Ms. Wallace said, just showing up at these meetings and holding us accountable. Mr. Olson watching that data closely and making wise suggestions for the stewardship of our resources. Mr. Adams volunteering in these times when those percentages of people with food insecurity are really sobering. And everyone I talk to says, what are we supposed to do in this avalanche of things happening? It's like address food insecurity. That's all the kinds of volunteering that we have in town. And then Mr. Fernandez just naming, celebrating, standing up for our values and our ways of being a community. I think that's how we stay strong, is by naming who we intend to be and who we're proud to be. And I'll throw out one more since I see, hello, Mr. Mendoza. Eric, it's good to see you. We have rent stabilization review coming up, and it is going to be so important not to count on an outside consultant to know how to bring people out. It's going to be on all of us to bring people out who are whose voices and information and perspectives are so important for that process to be successful, to generate viable findings that we can all move on. So everybody, anybody you know who rents, anybody you know who's a small landlord, promote this. Make sure they turn out, make sure they engage, make sure they're educated about the process, because it's going to affect not just them, but every single one of us in this community. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Well, I just want to echo my colleagues' appreciation of everyone that has come out tonight and provided comments. Meals on Wheels, Daniel, thank you so much for your continued advocacy and support for people in our community. I know some of us, including myself, have had a chance to do some ride-alongs, and you have to see it to fully understand not just the fact that you're addressing food insecurity, but you're also addressing senior loneliness, and you build relationships with people in our community. So thank you all so much for that. There's a few things that I have to get through, and I want to make sure I get through them quickly. Yes, MML was awesome. Thank you so much, Councilmember DeBala, for saying it. No. I less for me to say. I will be at the Presbyterian Fall Bazaar. I'll make sure I head through over the weekend. And on on Saturday. And on Sunday, I will be participating in the Maple Trees Support Group's Family Wellness and Digital Literacy Graduation Celebration event. And I had an opportunity to participate in that event last year, where there's a number of women from Ethiopia who come together and are taught how to use technology to help them with furthering not just their lives, but their families as well. And it's a beautiful ceremony that they have. And so that is on Sunday. There's been a number of things that folks have already mentioned, but I'm super excited about to share. Again, Piney Branch, Piney Branch, Piney Branch. Getting to this point is something that has taken years, nearly a decade. So to finally have the full renovation included in the superintendent's CIP is the first hurdle that we have yet to be able to reach in many years. So I'm very excited, definitely plan to be testifying. I know members of council will be definitely continuing to advocate for moving this project forward. But I do just want to thank all of the residents, all of my colleagues that have really worked, and our partners in the county council, Kate Stewart, Laura Stewart, all of with the Board of Education, all of the folks who have taken time out to talk to us about ways that we can try to push this thing forward has been really instrumental. But the work isn't done yet. We got to get it through the Board of Ed, and we got to get it through the County Council, but I have full faith that we'll be able to move forward. Additionally, I just released a blog in support of our federal employees. For folks that may not be aware, I also am a furloughed Fed. I recognize firsthand how difficult it is to be unsure of whether or not you're going to get paid, unsure of whether or not you're going to have a job. And so it is just really difficult times for so many of our federal employees and contractors and the like that are basically have their livelihoods put on pause while we wait for other people to do their jobs. So the blog was released today. There's lots of resources there to help support people who are in the midst of job searches or transition, but also tips and tricks for folks to keep in mind about information you need as a federal employee and other resources, utility assistance and the like, that is available now for federal employees. So I want to encourage people to take a look. And then lastly, I would like to again thank our new Poet Laureate, David Alberto Fernandez. Your poetry was moving, but the fact that you are doing it in a way that is bilingual and for as many people as you can reach in a single poem is so powerful. And we're so appreciative to have you in our city. And so if you would indulge us for a minute, we would like to have you come up and take a photo with the council so that we can commemorate this moment. So with that, we're going to turn things over to our city manager for city manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, and to our residents and guests here this evening. Just have a abbreviated report this evening, and we have a lot else on the agenda tonight. So from the Housing and Community Development Department, traffic calming and sidewalk requests. See a problem? Let us know. As specified in the administrative regulations, a Tacoma Park resident may submit a request to the city manager for a new sidewalk or a new traffic calming device located within 1/4 mile of their primary residence. Requests need to be submitted by October 31st. Requests submitted by October 31st will be considered by council in the budget process for the following year. Later requests will be considered for future budget years. Please submit your requests by Friday, October 31st on the city's website, www.tacomaparkmd.gov. Drop, quote, traffic calming and sidewalk requests, unquote, in the search field. That's traffic calming and sidewalk requests. From the Recreation Department, upcoming senior trips through the Recreation Department are filling fast. Limited spots still available. Information for senior trips can be found on the city website or by calling our senior coordinator, Hazel Hodgson, at 301-891-7290. Also from the Housing and Community Development Department, this coming Tuesday, October 21st, come hear Robin Greenfield at the Community Center. Dude Making a Difference is Robin's first-person account of his incredible adventure in radical sustainability. He comes to Tacoma Park on a tour during which he is foraging all of his food to demonstrate that it can be done in communities across the United States. The talk begins at 7 p.m. and is free to everyone. The Tacoma Park Recreation Department is committed to making its programs accessible to all residents. Our scholarship program is designed to assist individuals and families residing in the city of Tacoma Park by offering reduced fees for recreation programs and activities. This initiative ensures that financial constraints do not prevent residents from participating in opportunities to learn, grow, and enjoy recreational experiences. Important information. Scholarships are available to Tacoma Park residents only. All scholarships expire annually on December 31st. A new application must be submitted each year to maintain eligibility. How to apply? You can do it either in person or online. In person, applications can be picked up at either the Tacoma Park Community Center or the Tacoma Park Recreation Center. Online, please visit the City of Tacoma Park website and search for scholarship to download a printable PDF. Applications are available in multiple languages. And finally, submission options. In person, you can drop off your completed application at either of our facilities, again, the Community Center or the Recreation Center. By email, send your completed application to recreation@tacomaparkmd.gov. For more information, please contact the Recreation Department directly. We look forward to helping you participate in our wide range of programs. And that concludes my report this evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move to our presentation this evening. We have the Community Quality of Life Grant Report.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the council, Mr. DeSpirito. I also want to thank Patty Mallon, who just disappeared. Oh, there she is. Good, good. My safety net here, who knows all staff, dedicated staff member working on this, and also all the other members of the grant committee who've been serving with me. introduce them in just a second, and especially to Rena Schiff, who put together this amazing slide presentation, as well as the annual report, which I think you have hopefully in your packet or in front of you. In case I didn't mention it, my name is Jim Sebastian. I'm a Ward 1 resident and member of the committee, and I guess recently was told that I am now co-chair of the committee. As you probably know, our goal is to fund local groups to provide access and opportunities for greater participation in the arts and sciences for adults and children of all ages. This is the list of members. We try to be as geographically diverse as possible, though we have a little extra representation in Ward 1 right now. Just to get right into the grant, what the grants look like this year in terms of a breakdown. About half of them are for arts and humanities programs. That could be after-school programs, et cetera. Also, workforce development was about 25%, which is an important part of our applicant pool, as well as STEAM, so more science and technology programs for kids and adults. They are all required to match our grants 1-for-1 and usually do more. We're usually a small part of a larger program, and our piece ensures that they are serving Tacoma Park residents. I think it's a minimum 75% or 75% have to be Tacoma Park residents. Here's some of the themes that are flowing through a lot of the grants as we go through our kind of deliberative process and pick grants each year, all leading to a stronger community. I've got a lot of numbers. I'll try not to hit all of them. They're all in your report, but this kind of gives you an idea of the impact that we're making. I think sometimes we've come and said we've given out X number of grants for X number of dollars, and that's usually enough. But I think we want to dig a little deeper. We're benefiting over 2,000 people, 2,000 residents and children, adults in the Tacoma Park area. We have over 3,000 indirect beneficiaries. 2,500 hours of programming delivered, all 6 wards, all ages, and we're leveraging also about 500 plus hours of volunteer efforts in addition to the staff funding that we provide. A few more numbers, I'll just cherry pick a few of them. 155 high school seniors receive college application support and study skills support, workforce training to over 40 adults, jobs ranging for 18 immigrants that average salaries of around $66,000. 47 artists and entrepreneurs attended professional development sessions. 195 youth participated in after-school programming. 30 teens engaged in storytelling and filmmaking. We're going to show you some of those groups in a minute. So yeah, here's the groups. I think you're probably familiar with most of them, either through our grant program or just being in the community. Everyone from Dance Exchange to Docs in Progress to the Rolling Terrace Elementary School. Really, and like I said, we could set everything from arts programs to science programs to workforce development, all with small grants of $5,000 to $10,000 usually. Just going to give you an example of 3 of the groups. One is the Ethiopian Community Center. They provide primarily job training and other job support services, things like resume running, interview skills. So What Else? More of a youth after-school programming, which includes food, which is a popular theme tonight. We're going to talk a little bit more in a minute about food security, very important. Action Youth Media. This is one of the groups that does, kids make documentaries. This was a really neat one because it involves storytelling with local residents, usually old residents who have a lot of stories to tell about the community, and those will be, captured indefinitely for posterity. We've got some great kind of takeaways from some of the recipients. Just for example, the Rolling Terrace principal said the joy and excitement that Carpe Diem programs have brought to our school community is immeasurable. So that's a nice plug for this after-school program, which is also where my kids went many years ago. I was going to take questions now, but maybe I'll just have 2 more slides because it kind of rolls into something we've heard about earlier tonight and something we're working on moving forward, which is food insecurity. We used our grants committee to help direct some of the food insecurity funding that was still available from the stimulus days, and which was nice because we were able to use our kind of grant application system and help weed through the applications. Meals on Wheels was one of the recipients. And at the same time, we were unable to fund some of the folks who had applied in the past, and we were rarely able to give funding to groups that, to give it their whole amount that they want. We're rarely able to give them their so we can serve more groups, right? And there's a little bit more detail here about the types of organizations we're funding in 2026, which you'll get a full report on next year, of course. But just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, so if you take the total pie of about $110,000, this past year, almost half of those were, well, more than half if you include the new food grants. We had the food bridge grants from the stimulus days, some new food grants. So that shrunk the workforce development and youth, after school enrichment programs to a smaller piece of the pie. So I know you're used to people coming and saying they need more money, which of course we do. These are good. All of these are good programs. But in order to really maintain the food, or to maintain the arts and sciences and after school training, and also provide food funding, we really need to really double the budget for this program, or these maybe it's more than one program. It's like food and then the other services. So I would just like for you all to keep that in mind moving forward to the next funding year, so that you don't think, well, we gave them $100,000 and then times are tough, but we gave them another $100,000. But we really have twice as much need if you add in the food. Am I getting this right, Patty?
You're getting that right.
Okay. Because some of these, the food is such, as Mr. Adams said, food is such a huge problem, and it's funded at many levels, low city, county, state levels. I'm not saying Tacoma Park shouldn't do their part, but we don't want the other programs to suffer, because whenever we have our deliberations as a committee, who can argue against food? If you're not fed, you can't do these fun arts and science programs. So that's pretty obvious. But anyway, that's all I have tonight.
Great, thank you so much. And you hit the nail on the head in terms of that last slide and the dilemma in terms of trying to have a grant program that covers a lot. And when you have a big issue, an expensive big issue, like food insecurity, it can make things complicated in terms of how we should fund these types of activities. Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, thank you very much for that and for all the work on the committee that the committee's done, and to the staff coordinator. Thank you. One of my questions was going to be, I have two. One was about the money that you say you turned down I think it was five food providers that you were not able to fund, assuming that those food providers were all workable proposals. So how much would that have been if they had been funded? How much extra would that have been?
A total request, that I don't know. I'll have to turn to Patty for that.
About.
So they weren't necessarily food insecurity proposals. They were proposals.
Patty, can you come to the mic?
Okay, I misunderstood. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the grants that showed up in the FY25 list, some of those organizations applied again, and they had very successful programs. Not in food insecurity, in the other categories, and we were unable to fund them because we had to stretch those dollars to also cover food insecurity.
Yeah. Okay, and so that would be about how much then?
So I'm trying to remember. We had almost double the requests, or almost doubled the amount of funding we had available totally.
That's the recommendation.
Yeah. So those five were just repeat.
Okay.
Were previously funded ones. Yeah.
We can get you those numbers.
Thank you. And the second thing I wanted to know, Councilmember Landman mentioned the Tacoma Foundation grant program that is open now. And so what, if any, conversations do you have with them about what gets funded, or are the definitions of the programs at this point separate enough that you don't do that?
That's a great question. I've talked to
That's why I'm
Kathy
looking
Porter
at
in the
Patty
past.
and not you.
Oh, you're sorry. Well, I know we have not had any formal like discussions with the foundation, but I'm pretty familiar with it. I think that should be on our agenda, is to kind of like figure out you're doing
Who's
this,
doing
you're doing
what?
this, and I've
Yeah.
maybe looked a little bit at their finances to figure out the types of groups, the amount of funding. It is similar. There's not a lot of overlap,
There's not.
but
Yeah,
maybe
'cause-
we can figure out a way to maximize our resources.
Yeah, because they have just changed last year their structure of grants to have some be project-oriented and some be ongoing support-oriented. So it might be worth checking in to get everybody up to date on who's doing what. Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, historically, their grants have been much smaller. They've been
Yes.
capping out at about $5,000, which is the low end for our grants. So they have a slightly different take on that than we're able to do. But yeah, I think we should have some conversations moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you for the presentation. I like the program themes slide, and I wanted to ask if you could define adaptive programming, and because I have an image in my mind, but it has to do with people who are differently abled, and I don't know if it has to do with that, and just maybe give a couple examples so you understand.
I didn't put that together. I think it's more along the lines of being able to adapt over the years, and even over the year. When I started on the committee, it was COVID times, and folks really had to pivot. Doing an after-school program virtually, wow. They were picking up art supplies, delivering them to apartments, trying to do Zoom things. That's one example. I don't know, Patty, what's your take on some of the other themes or on that theme?
Yeah, I think it is very much rolling with the punches, including things that we're experiencing now where people aren't comfortable leaving their homes. And how do you still serve those people, and trying to be creative around all of the changing circumstances they're facing?
Okay, makes great sense. Thank you.
I'm gonna stay right here.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I always love hearing from our small grants program coordinators and staff. I just, since this might be one of the only discussions we have about grants before we get to budget season, and you brought up a really important point, and we also had Meals on Wheels here tonight. I mean, it's a huge and daunting statistic to hear that 30+% of families in Montgomery County are food insecure. I'm going to go ahead and reveal a truth about my family. We've got 2 unemployed people besides our council in my household, and we have 3 children, and we've been on SNAP benefits. And I'm sharing this because it's the way for me to ground truth some of the things I'm seeing, especially getting the benefit of being in this role. And what I am seeing, to be really frank with you, is I'm thrilled that we are meeting food security needs. But I want to remind us, too, that we're probably about to see a lot of other things falling apart. And we're fortunate to live in a place where we have a lot of food security type benefits right now. Right now, SNAP benefits might be one of the first things to go from the federal government anytime soon. And when that does happen, then we're looking at something that's probably more than double that somebody somewhere is going to need to be filling. However, what I wanted to remind my council colleagues about as we think about this moving forward is that dynamic situation, and that we learned some really, really important lessons when we did the direct cash assistance program. And I can't pull it out quickly, but if we get back into this discussion later, and even for your grant committee as we move forward, I would love to hear your feedback on some of the ARPA lessons that we learned, and whether or not perhaps, depending on how things move over the next 6 months or so before we put out our next grant ask and decide what to put our budget in, whether we might want to consider pivoting a little bit with some of those grant funds, maybe not just exclusively on food security. During COVID, there was discussion around workforce development. We know there are some childcare gaps that are really big. And what I've found, and again, I'll go back to this when I compare it to the ARPA dollars and among my constituents, is that there's a lot of food. There are a lot of food deliverables in our community. There's SNAP benefits. There's food that you can get at different. You can get to places to get food, and it's very essential. But where it becomes very tricky is when you're trying to make other things happen because there aren't as many supports out there, and they begin to eat away until I actually have seen people moving out of our community. And so I'm wondering about the dynamism of that and whether we want to look at that. We probably don't want to replicate the direct cash assistance program. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that forward and remind my colleagues to take a look at some of that data on the ARPA findings. They were very, very interesting, and they showed how families made decisions about emergency health care dollars as well as emergency cash assistance for paying for housing and such. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. And I think you raise an interesting point in that this dynamic it's different than COVID, because during COVID, there was this external influx of funds, but there was also additional resources that were provided at the state and federal level in terms of rental assistance and things of that nature. And also there was an influx of a lot of food providers because there was a lot of federal money that went to supplying food and funding these local nonprofits. And when I've had conversations with local nonprofits around what they are anticipating is you have this shrinkage of federal funds that ultimately is resulting in them not being able to tap into the same level of federal funds that they've received in the past. And what I anticipate happening is some of these local nonprofits that if they're not able to figure out ways to become financially solvent through other means, they will lose the funding necessary to keep going. And so I actually anticipate seeing more organizations that will apply for what is typically would be considered small change. Like if you're a nonprofit where you invest your time, you're going after the big bucks. The applications are a lot more rigorous. It's a lot more oversight. It's a lot harder, but the reward, if you get it, is a lot more money. But if those are drying up, I can't imagine us seeing more of our local nonprofits who are having some funding issues coming to the city and applying for these types of grants more. So my question then becomes increase of funding, but also does it make it challenging because we have so many different topics that could be included in one grant? And we did it. I mean, I said, yeah, add food, add workforce. I did it. I admit it. I put a lot of stuff on you all, and I apologize. But now that I am seeing it all together, I'm like, the types of programming is different. The framework that you have to have when you're trying to compare between the types of programs is different, and you have a smaller amount of money. So one question I do have is, if we ultimately anticipate food or the need for food growing, and I don't want to put another application on you all because I know that's a pain, but if we ultimately need to have more resources for food or expand, put more money in, does it make sense to separate out the grant announcements for food versus everything else, or does it make sense to just still keep it all together? Right now I'm just brainstorming out loud because I could see how this could become challenging to try to award for all of these different program or policy areas in one tranche. Does it make sense to try to separate them out a little bit?
I think that previously we did have two different funding streams,
Yep.
so that made sense. When we lost the ARPA funding stream, we had to combine it in the only one we had that was viable. I think that is still workable. I think it's workable to do it all at once with greater resources and some direction as to a percentage of this would go towards food insecurity. That wasn't defined in this last round. So as Jim said, It's really hard to say no to food, but we didn't fund any of those organizations to the amount they asked for, except for Gilbert Highlands, because they asked for the minimum. But everybody else, we cut back a little here and cut back a little here, and so we could stretch it out and fund more organizations doing more things. So I think the funding mechanism can all go through community quality of life with more resources and some direction as to percentages.
Okay.
Well, let's see this much applied here and this much applied here.
That's really helpful, because I know we did it to you, and so I'm trying to figure out some way.
Yeah, no, we were, and we discussed it too. Like it was the committee agreed on it, mainly for administrative purposes of the volunteers who have to go through the applications. It's easier to do it all at once, but then it is harder to weigh food versus, after school science. But if we had, regardless of the size of the pie, if we had a percentage, like it's half for food and half for, that would make our lives a little bit easier.
Great, that's really helpful to hear. Councilmember Landman.
I think it's really smart for us to be thinking about how much discretionary funding, if you want to call it that, although when you're talking about food insecurity, it doesn't feel very discretionary. But I was reminding myself that when we were talking with people at the Crossroads Market last time around the first of the month, right before the shutdown, they were saying that, the 15th of the month, they're not going to have the SNAP benefits going into their account to enable them to pay the double SNAP benefits on Wednesday. So I don't know what happened today, whether that just shut down the double SNAP benefits, but it's happening as we speak. And at the farms meetings of the Council of Governments, the Food and Agriculture Council, last time we met, the discussion was all about the unbelievable reductions in funding availability to the states and the expectation of the additional matching funds that are going to be required of the states under the cuts that were made in the big ugly bill. So the assistance that we've been getting from the federal government, and the state is going to be reduced to us. So we are going to have additional needs here. So I was thinking as this conversation was going on about what our granting abilities are going to be, that we are going to need to make adjustments because our resources are not going to get any bigger, they're going to get smaller, and that we have this Food Providers Council of all the food providers that get together and have these sort of coordinating discussions with the city's staff, and that perhaps we need to think about some collective thinking in that regard for other types of arts and science providers to also think collectively with us, and that maybe, given that for workforce development, that's the kind of activity that actually you need to draw the net a little bit wider, and a lot of activity has been going on at the county level and at the COG level in that area. Lots of different resources have been stood up by the county in particular for federal employees. So maybe that's an area where before we start thinking about grants for workforce development, to me that is not necessarily something that can be as effectively done at such a micro level as a town of 17,000 people. So, I mean, I think it seems like something maybe we could have a broader discussion about when we're thinking about all of our grant programs before we, I guess, have them be small and sort of compartmentalized, that maybe that we need to think about them in a more holistic way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. I think to add to to that point of kind of thinking strategically, I would say that workforce development is also an increasing need, but I would also say that we as a council need to make sure that we're also leveraging all of our mechanisms as well. We will have legislative priorities discussions forthcoming. Last year, we talked to D20, and we knew, at least we knew this was coming, because one of our legislative priorities for District 20 was, hey, you need to start thinking about SNAP. And what it's going to look like and what the eligibility may be. That was something that we had noted during our legislative priorities discussion last year. And so I think it will be really important for us to start not only ensure that all of our partners are coordinated, but that we are also making sure that we're leveraging all of the different ways that we can to, when we identify gaps in our ability, identify a need and identify gaps that we have in addressing those needs, that we try to put those kinds of things in front of other members or other key stakeholders for the city, particularly our state reps and our federal reps. Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you. I just wanted to chime in some way. I'm thinking so much about all of these things that we're talking about. My background is in nonprofit management and fundraising, so I'm thinking about all of these things. So I look forward to working with my colleagues and staff to see if there are ways to get creative on how to be able to increase the funds. The current thing floating through my head is if there is some way for us to encourage matching whatever the city gives, raising that money from the community as a matching, which in turn would triple, right? Triple the amount if we're also having our nonprofits match it. Anyway, thank you so much for doing this important work.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. And so with that, we are at time for this discussion. I want to thank you all, our ACD's team and our Grants Review Committee, for all of the work that you all have been doing. I know that this is not an easy task, but you all do it so masterfully. We appreciate your service.
Thank you.
A good one. All right, next item. We're moving into our voting sessions this evening. The first item is the single reading ordinance approving procurement of 2 public works vehicles. Just want to check with staff really quickly to confirm that there has been no modification since the work session on this item. Okay, awesome. All right, so would someone like to move the single reading ordinance approving procurement of the 2? Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel. Any points of discussion? Okay, seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Landman.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala.
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak.
Aye.
Councilmember Wesselek.
Aye.
Mayor Cersey.
Aye. The next item is a single reading ordinance approving procurement of a leaf vacuum. Just want to confirm with staff that there's no modifications. Okay, thank you, City Manager DeSpirito. Would someone like to move the single reading ordinance approving procurement of a leaf vacuum?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Do we have any points of discussion on this one?
Just one point of discussion. I think we heard very clearly last week what great data Public Works is collecting on the leaf collection. And so with fall approaching, I hope that we will all keep encouraging residents who do rake their leaves into the street to think about mulching in place and see how the data may come in future years in terms of maybe downsizing this program.
All right, thank you very much. All right, Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, and to that end, I note that the city just posted a blog on that very topic of how to leave the leaves in place, what to do, how to do it, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. I plan to put it in my newsletter this week.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Okay, just confirming. All right. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Landman.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala.
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel.
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Aye.
Councilmember Wesselek.
Aye.
Mayor Cersey.
Aye. Next and last item in the voting session this evening is single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Avio Inc. for stop sign cameras. Just want to confirm with the city manager that there's no modifications. Okay. Would someone like to move this item?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Wesselek. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Any points of discussion on this one? Councilmember Landman, is that a point of discussion? Okay, ready to vote.
I had a
Councilmember
point.
Slagle, do you have a?
Oh, yeah. I had a very helpful conversation with City Manager DeSpirito, and and brought up the point that having these cameras calibrated for a 6 mile an hour roll through seems to be a dangerous speed for a roll through. And so I think, City Manager, you said that you would, I wanted to confirm, you said you could check with other jurisdictions, or have the police chief check and see where they had ended up calibrating the roll through speed. Okay, thank you.
May I do
Okay,
wanna
in
make
order
one
to
point.
ensure that I'm able to call people in order, if your light is just on for the purpose of voting, please turn your light off. If you have a comment that you would like to make, please turn your light on. Okay. Councilmember DeBala.
Sorry, I got sidetracked.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
I just wanted to flag for residents, I had a number of questions after our conversation last week about this that were actually potentially responded to by the back and forth that occurred during the public meeting on this, and that were responded to in the, on the slide deck that was created for that public meeting. And that was just recently made available to us, and it should be posted on the city's website so that people can access that. And I think it is now available, or should be potentially put on the website somewhere, but it was shared with the council. So I think that could answer remaining questions that people have.
And just want to check with our communications director, that manager, that yes, that the link for the police community meeting on the stop sign cameras has been posted on the web. Okay, thank you. All right, Councilmember DeBala.
My comment had to do with this, with the level at which the cameras are set. And I've gotten some feedback about that too, but let's remind everybody that whatever it winds up being, there will be a month of grace period for everyone to get used to it, which I really appreciate, rather than just diving straight into, because then people will see what that feels like for them in their car. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, and I do just want to thank the police department for engaging the community, for doing the legwork and working with Avio, and also for working with the council as we were advocating for the ability to participate in this pilot. So this is a huge step forward for us, and do want to thank those that were engaged to get us to this point. And with that, I am going to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Landman.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala.
Yes.
Councilmember Schlegel.
Aye.
Councilmember Honzak.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Aye.
Councilmember Wesseluk.
Aye.
Mayor Searcy.
Aye. All right, so I'm going to do a quick check to see if we can move into work sessions, or do folks need a break? I'm seeing heads nod. Let's move forward. Okay. No, I'm seeing everyone's like, yes, let's go. So, all right. If you, all right. So the next item this evening is the Community Connectors Program update. So with that, I will turn it over to city staff. Oh, let me get your mic going. There you go.
Hello. All right. Well, thank you all for having me on tonight, and excited to talk a little bit about the next steps for the Community Connectors Program, a program that's been in the works for some years now, and kick it off here. So just a quick update for council on the priority being community connectors. Again, my name is Ryan Kelly. I'm Director of Communications for the city. If we have not met before, the purpose of tonight's meeting is first to provide an update to council about the next steps for the Community Connectors Initiative. This is the implementation of the Community Connectors Program. We are proposing to delay until the development of a plan through the National League of Cities program, their Community Engagement Academy, which we were accepted into at the end of August. And we are taking the first steps into beginning that program with a team of city staff and community partners. One of the other goals is to brief council on the NLC, National League of Cities program process, and how it will help us get to take those next steps for the Community Connectors program. And just a brief note, participation in this program does not constitute implementing Community Connectors program, but we are hoping that through this process we will come to a group decision on what that next step will look like. And then another purpose is to brief council on the NLC program work plan, so kind of give a layout of what this timeline and schedule look like as we work through this 12-month process together. And then finally, to give recommendations for our next steps and seek council direction on how we want to proceed. So just a little bit of background and timeline. In the FY23 budget, council identified Community Connectors as a priority and allocated $200,000 in the American Rescue Plan Act to launch this, what was formerly known as Community Navigators Program. Henceforth, I don't know the history behind what kind of made it now known as Community Connectors Program, but in FY26 there was $150,000 allocated in general fund revenue to fund the initiative. In 2024, we, as a city, had reached out to a nonprofit called Impact Silver Spring, and had submitted a proposal to help move forward with the Community Connectors program, and we had given them a vision statement to help guide their thought process with that. And it was based on some successful community engagement initiatives in other municipalities throughout the country. In April 2025, Impact Silver Spring formally withdrew their due to staff limitations, and now staff has been working to consider alternatives. In July 2025, we sent a memo to council to advising on some potential next steps, including the National League of Cities Community Engagement Academy, which we had submitted an application for and were successfully chosen, one of 6 cities to be able to participate in this Community Engagement Academy, and we are now underway. We began this process, and it'll continue until September 2026, this 12-month program. So now we're hoping to develop the strategy for those next steps. The mission vision, for the city of Tacoma Park, it's really to reach those portions of the population who are especially historically underrepresented, and build community engagement practices that are both sustainable and wide-ranging, and to be able to be responsive to the needs of all residents. And we're hoping that community connectors can serve as liaisons between both city information resources and resources that are resources and those services that are being provided by the community groups, such as those that we had today here with us, such as Meals on Wheels, that are doing really great work. So the goal is, how do we bridge that gap? So the 2025 Community Engagement Academy is one way in that we are hoping to be able to take the next steps. This is, like I said earlier, this is a 12-month experience that we'll work with NLC, and they'll provide their expertise to evaluate our current capacity as a city, as well as our external organizations that we'll be working with to help come together and build upon both of our internal and external capacities. Through this process, we'll be developing a concrete work plan to help, which will outline specific strategies and milestones that we'll need to reach to build successful community engagement infrastructure, as well as establish that institutional commitment to community engagement that is so crucial to having long-standing, sustainable community engagement and community partnerships. So the objectives of this program, some of them, amongst others, are to work alongside our community partners to define our needs of residents, develop strategies, and identify what components are necessary to really build a Community Connectors program that works for all residents, and build that infrastructure that will help us have success going forward with this program. And then also beginning to rebuild and repair trust with residents that has deteriorated over the past, few years especially, but has been, it's been a real issue in the United States, across the country, and this will be one way that we help rebuild some of those ties that have been lost, and also determine the best use of how we're going to use the funding, the $150,000 that has been currently allocated, whether it's FY26 or FY27. So we do have a team composed of city staff and community partners. On the team currently, we have myself. I've taken the team lead with NLC. We also have Mariama Karoma, who is a community engagement specialist with the housing department, and also Christine Heidebrecht, who works with the city manager's office as executive assistant and was crucial in developing our community engagement vision statement. We also have from the Crossroads Development Authority, Calista Perez, who is the community engagement coordinator and executive assistant, as well as from Tommy's Pantry, Wendy Kent and Adrian Tipton, who are both with the nonprofit Tommy's Pantry, and representatives from the Tacoma Park Providers Council, which serves as a really great example of how community engagement can work in the city. And we're hoping to take notes and bring it here to the city. So there is a 12-month process. Now, this is, of course, malleable and can change, but this is a 4-step process that they're going to take us through the Community Engagement Academy. The first, which we are currently in, is the foundational exploration, basically meaning we're taking notes on what kind of community engagement practices are happening in the city currently, and kind of taking a inventory of the different practices that are ongoing. The next step, which we are entering into very soon, is data collection inquiry to determine what some of those needs are, both qualitatively and quantitatively, as we observe the different processes that are going on currently. And then we'll enter into the strategy implementation planning process, which will hopefully then determine a plan for implementing a community engagement initiative, and what I hope is the Community Connectors initiative. The implementation and observation portion then comes next, and after we then implement a program and observe how it works in the first few months, we can then reflect and reiterate, and this will be an ongoing process as we hope to develop something that continues to grow as we move forward together. So I mentioned the current phase, and talking about how we're determining what our current practices are in the city. I do have a couple of examples that we are currently working through with the NLC, and I want to note that with NLC we're working through both their team and also a there's an outside partner, an outside organization that has a lot of experience through community engagement initiatives called Cosilience Group, and they're providing some great technical assistance for both our city staff and our nonprofit partners to develop as leaders in community engagement. So currently we're doing a authentic community engagement checklist, which is, again, determining what practices are working for us in the city, and also what practices are could be improved upon, and then reflecting upon those practices. And this is, again, a work in progress. There will be other opportunities to receive public feedback, and I would love to hear from council on any other ideas that you think would work best for your residents. Part of this process is working through this spectrum of public participation. There are, and not to dive too deep into this, but in this spectrum, you can see we move from inform to empower. A lot of the community engagement that is currently going on in the city is informing, and it's good. It's a lot of the stuff that we at the communications department do, things like posting things in a newsletter, posting things on social media. But we really want to get to that point of empowerment where we can, especially collaboration and empowerment, where we can really put things back in the hands of residents and make sure residents know that their voice truly matters and that they are truly involved in the process of decision-making in the city. So that's what we aspire. There's definitely some examples of that that's working well in the city today, but the question is, how do we make that sustainable and be proactive and not reactive as things come up and we're trying to address issues that are important to us. So next steps, on October 29th, staff are going to bring forth to council a proposed council resolution to memorialize the council's commitment to the Community Connectors program as a council priority, and also directing staff on how they would like to implement the Community Connectors program until the development of the plan following the city's participation in the Community Engagement Academy. Also directing staff to work toward developing Community Connectors framework, plan for implementation, and then also directing us how you want us to use that funding, whether it's using it in FY26 or rolling over to FY27 once we have a plan in place to implement. And then March and April will be the next update to council. So now I know that was a lot of information. I want to just leave the floor for any questions.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been really helpful, and I am really excited about the things that you all are going to learn and the support that you're going to have through the NLC process. One question I have is, and I think it was only like a couple of us that were around when the initial idea of the Community Connectors program came to be. And one of the major goals was to try to have a way. I mean, I could just tell you the question, the problem. The problem was either we had people in our multifamily buildings that were, and still are, instrumental in knowing people in the building, having the trust within the building, and connecting them to things like addressing things like food insecurity, working with Small Things Matter to have food delivered so that people will know where the food is, or bringing information from the city to them. And so the initial idea was, hey, let's figure out some way to provide resources for them, because they were doing all of this and in many cases didn't have a way to print out anything and the like. Understanding that our issue is a broader one, like at the time of COVID, it was really, we're not able to move around as much as we normally would. How do we get to where people are and have those resources kind of funnel and figure out some way to connect people more effectively to city versus county resources? Are you all thinking now that, or at least how you're structuring the NLC support, is it more broadly related to how to engage some of our more hard to reach residents more globally? Or is there still this desire, or this, and I saw this in one of the slides, but is there still this desire to make sure that when we're talking about the connections, it also includes aspects of access to services?
That's a great question, and I think one of the great things about what this program is going to do, it's going to help us build the capacity to address all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you mentioned, there's a lot of organizations, whether they be formal nonprofits or non-formal community groups, that are doing a lot of great work in the city and have really good ties to residents who might not necessarily be connected to the city, whether it's because they don't trust the government in general, but they trust their religious groups. They trust their their tenant organizations, and that's what they listen to. So through this program, what we're hoping to do is build that capacity both internally with the city and externally, so that we can have really close ties with all those different groups. And that's one of the important parts of this current process that we're going through. We're trying to analyze all of that's going on in the city. What community engagement is out there, what's working? How can we bring that all centralized with the city, and not saying that we're going to do these things through the city, but how can we build those connections with those different groups that are doing really great work, help build their capacity by giving them the resources that are within the city and making more formal ties, if that makes sense. So again, like the Providers Council is a really great example of how this is working currently. They come together and they discuss, what resources they need, what they're currently doing in the city. If we can do that on a larger scale with a bunch of different community groups, that can really help build the capacity of organizations that maybe we're working on a much smaller scale. So that's what I'm hoping to get to through this program, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Thank you so much. Councilmember Westlake.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. I have two questions. So we're one of 6 cities that were chosen for this. So my first question is how much, if any, collaboration amongst the 6 of you there are? And my second question is, are any of the other communities, do they also have an extremely diverse, large immigrant population, different languages? Because I'm really curious about how this process will help us with that outreach.
Yes, yes, and yes. So there is a large part of this process is going to be that collaboration with, they call it our cohort of cities. So there's going to be a lot of work that's just our inter-city team. But there's also going to be opportunities for engagement with the other 5 cities. So we already had one all-city meeting, and we had some really great conversations. One of the other cities is the city of Richmond, Virginia, and kind of got a sense of some of the issues that are really pressing them, and that you already kind of got the sense of what those interconnected issues are that exist between, more regionally, but they're dealing with a lot of the same things that we're having. But part of that selection process they looked at was what are the major issues that are that you're contending with as a community today? And one of even the questions that they asked me was very directly, how are you being impacted by current federal actions? And that was one of the questions. And I think I gave a very candid answer of how our community is being impacted and how we're trying to address it as a city and as a community in general. And I do think that it contributed largely to why we were selected.
Great, thank you. Councilmember DeBala.
Councilmember Westlake, were you done? I thought you said you had 2 questions. That was the 2 questions, okay. Sorry. Yeah, thank you for this and for all the thought and effort that went into developing this proposal and also the proposal to NLC in the first place. And so as the mayor was starting to say, just to refresh for everybody else, the original concept behind the community connectors was through COVID and was to make sure that residents who were hurting could be reached and that they could get what they needed. And that the assumption there was that the best way to do that, as the mayor was saying, was through residents who were doing it already anyway in the buildings. And then to use that as to engage them in a 2-way dialogue, to bring them then back, into civic engagement more broadly. So we may be in this position again with federal enforcement and federal unemployment, but since
And another epidemic.
and lots changed is what I was where I was going with that, and the needs may be a little different. And what I think I hear you saying, I do have 3 specific questions, but I do want to say a couple general things first. What I think I hear you saying is that originally we were focused on residents as the transfer, and I hear you saying that because of the changing situation, maybe we should be thinking about the community groups as the focus for the transfer and the translation going back and forth. And I'm not sold on that, but I get the difference, and I think it's a really interesting approach.
And I just want to say, too, I think through this process with the National League of City, we'll be able to get a sense of what that best structure is, and maybe it's a combination of both. But what I think is really beneficial of this process is that we're going to be able to go through a really meticulous process and determine what works best for our community as a whole. So it could be that, and we could still come back to that point, but we're going to learn through this process.
Yeah, that's great. And so the concept still remains the same, though, to target those who are the hardest to reach and try to make it a two-way street. Yeah, so we're all still with the basic concept behind it. I was a little surprised that you talked about institutionalizing the commitment to a community engagement, because I feel like several councils in a row have been working toward that, and I do also think that the city staff over the past few years has tried a lot of things and learned a lot of things. So that's all I wanted to say. And I wanted to quote to everybody else that the NLC says that they are looking at communities who, speaking of goals, who want to move beyond transactional one-time engagement to authentic connections, ongoing dialogue, shared decision-making. So thought you would be all interested in that. And so to my questions, it seems to me like there's a difference between having connectors and making connections. And so I don't want to lose that as you go through the program, because we've been talking about having connectors, and I'm not sure that's right anymore. Thank you. And I do want to use the funds that we set aside to further this effort, and I'm not sure if it's community connectors versus some other improvement in community engagement and connections. But I'm leery of, this has been going on for a while, and I'm leery of more delay in planning. Just want to say that, as much as I also think that this is a great way to approach it. One of my specific questions is, because this is so relevant right now, the world isn't stopping. We need to reach immigrants. We need to reach unemployed vets, renters. We're thinking about a citizen academy. I mean, so how does all of that plug into this planning program, for lack of a better word? Because all of that is going to be going on right now, whether we're in NLC or not. And so I don't want that to proceed in a vacuum without the things that we have to do right now. Does that make some sense?
Yeah. And of course, we're going to continue to work on community engagement, and we're going to learn things throughout this process that I hope to apply as we go forward. And already you're kind of starting to see some more ties that are being built through just conversations that we're having with nonprofits that maybe we weren't having as much previously.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that work is already happening. But when we talk about also institutionalizing these community engagement practices, it's having practices in place that are formalized and consistent.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the community engagement that we
consistent is good, because we have some over here, but not over here.
Exactly. There's a lot of inconsistency, and a lot of it's reactive. Reactive is it's good, but it's not always the best way to get ahead of the issues that are facing the community. So when we are able to institutionalize community engagement practices, then you're able to get ahead of the curve a little bit more. Obviously, you see it today. You can't prepare for things like this, but if you have these ties formalized and already in place, you're in better shape.
Yeah.
But it's a really great point that you bring up too, and the fact that this has been delayed for so long. The city faces really very real constraints itself, staffing limitations, and that's why we've looked at potentially partnering with outside organizations. So what I think is, again, really beneficial with this process is how it's going to build our internal and external capacity through what the staff might not have been able to do alone based on our own staffing limitations. Now we're going to be assisted through an outside organization with expertise in this to be able to take really guided next steps in developing a very thoughtful community engagement initiative. So there's a lot of benefits to, you know, taking that more meticulous process. But I do think, and I want to emphasize that there's a lot of good that's already coming out of the work that's, you know, just happened in the last few months. Conversations that haven't been happening before.
Ryan, could you please put the next step slide
two
back up?
specific
I'm
questions
sorry,
about the
Councilmember
slides.
DeBala, there's a number of lights. We
Okay.
only have like 8 minutes left, and there are other
I
lights.
did
so-
specifically want to ask about the, about the composition of the committee and why you set it up the way you have.
Councilmember
that
DeBala, we
question.
can come back to you after we've
Okay.
provided other council members an opportunity to ask questions. Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've been eagerly anticipating this dialogue for the 3 years that I've been on council. I'm super excited about the partnership with NLC, and I don't want to burst any bubbles. I'm dreadfully disappointed by the proposal to delay another year. Here's the thing, is that so I'm eager to take you up on the offer of, and I'm sorry I didn't do it before today's session. I know you were working too on putting together all the presentation materials for us, and the city has hit up against a number of hurdles itself, including what happened with Impact Silver Spring, right? So I don't know what the answers are, but what I can say is that the role of rebuilding and repairing trust is, of course, falling on staff right now, but it's also falling really seriously on council members. It's also that gap that we're talking about over the 3 years I've served on council has been filled by whoever has the bandwidth. That has included me. It has meant sacrificing $125,000 at least per year, and I'm sorry, I'm going to keep saying it. It needs to be understood that that's what I'm doing. Now, my residents who are helping me now because they see I'm struggling to serve our residents are also taking their own time, instead of looking for jobs, to make copies, to go put things under people's doors, to make sure people are getting what they need. We have got to fill this gap already yesterday. We cannot wait another year. I'm sorry. So I am offering myself to sit down and brainstorm with you further on at least allocating some of this money. We've already gone from 200 to 150. I am worried that future councils will, lose sight of what was existence, and we're going through some of the roughest times that I can remember in my years of existence. So I am eager to see some things. I think the NLC partnership is incredible, but we risk being up here and being too heady and forgetting about some of the really practical realities of how this can work. And I understand that there are real limitations on city staffing and kind of micro pockets of money and how do we allocate those. But we are a creative bunch with all of you. And I think that we can at least think of some creative solutions in the interim to make some of this stuff a little bit easier. Maybe it's just packaging that piece of it up smaller. Something that would be some basic funding and some stipends, maybe, the way it's already modeled after in other countries. It gets given to our multifamily buildings. It might be a conversation with Devin's department, for example, with Mariama. And then that gets to my next question is about the composition of the committee. So could you just share with us a little bit, is it 6 people that are engaging in the NLC process, or is it broader than that when you go into the stage you laid out?
Yeah, so in the process, the NLC asked us to keep it to the core, they call it a core team, to keep it smaller, with representatives that we know are going to have the time capacity and are engaged in this kind of work already. As we move forward with this process, there's going to be opportunities for broader engagement. For example, they're going to be getting into some focus groups that are going to be asking more broader segments of the community to give feedback and discuss what their needs are. But that's just an example. This is through the 12-month process. They're going to give us a lot of other opportunities for broader community engagement. So they've really emphasized that because that was one of the things that we also asked. We know that there's a lot of different voices and opinions that we need to hear from, and they have assured us that through the process, we're going to be able to hear from many different perspectives and voices beyond what's on the core team.
Well, I'll just put a placeholder then for the smaller discussion that it is my feeling that that group strikes me as not as broad-based as I might like to see, having 2 members, for example, from a single nonprofit organization in our community. It does, even if they're part of the Providers Council, out of only a 6-member group, doesn't seem quite as diverse, if you will, as I think would be fruitful. But and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Can you hit your light?
No, apologies.
Councilmember Landman.
I had exactly the same reaction about the representation on the council. This question is going to go back a little bit to the beginning to try and understand. It's from what you were describing, although the language is a little bit different. Every type of process like this has slightly different verbiage, but I think you're kind of starting with a landscape assessment to understand who all the players are. But could you just be a little bit more specific about who is carrying that out and how they're carrying it out? Is it a paper exercise? Is it an interview exercise? Is it a telephone calls and door knocking? And is it being done by these people, or is it being done by the outside consultants? I'd just like to understand how you're mapping who the people are that you're hoping to engage with.
The landscape assessment you're
Yeah.
asking? Yes.
Yeah.
So that process was through the was done through a guided process with the NLC, and we discussed it as our group. And I do want to speak briefly to the team composition and emphasize the NLC's emphasis on keeping the team small. And the reason we have 2 from one organization is just to help with their own capacity. Again, I did discuss this, and if we needed a broader team, but when you have too many people trying to do very specific pieces of work, sometimes things can get overcomplicated.
Yeah.
And so that was and I do want to emphasize that was a topic of discussion. But as far as the landscape assessment, that was guided by the National League of Cities and is still ongoing. And we're doing a kind of a checklist and just brainstorming what different, and it's not comprehensive, but it's just a start. And we'll be able to get other input into, if we're missing anything. But we have a pretty good running list so far of some people who are doing work that we know of. And we'll continue to grow that. And again, we're in the very early stages of this. I'm sure there'll be more to come as we move forward.
So to just make sure I understand, this is a follow-up question. So the people that are filling out the map is the people who are on the core team?
Yep.
And, one other question is that, for community engagement, it seems to me like electeds are also sort of part of that landscape. Is there any way that we could see the landscape assessment as sort of part of the process? And are you planning to sort of query the members of the council as part of it?
Those are part of the next steps.
Okay.
We just need to put again, we're very early on in this,
Okay.
but they have emphasized, National League of Cities, that the next steps after we do that kind of initial is to share it more broadly with both elected officials of the city and other city staff. So we'll be getting additional input, but we're just kind of in those initial phases right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Landman, are you done?
Yes, I did. I am interested in, I understand you want to keep it small. That makes perfect sense to me. And you want to have people with some expertise. That makes sense. I'm not sure it answers the question of whether having less variety or of the organizations represented on the core team. I don't think you've necessarily spoken to that with as much clarity, if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I think the core team, again, there's a very specific role that the core team's going to play. And this is, we're going to get assignments from the National League of Cities. And if the more people you bring on to those very specific assignments, the harder it is to manage, and that was what was emphasized through the National League of Cities. So, I talked to different city staff who was working with these nonprofit organizations, and also through, since I've taken on the team lead, some of the pre-existing relationships that I already had, and the conversations that I already had, and knew that these individuals had the time, capacity, and the interest in taking this on. So it was a thought out process in determining who would be on the core team. But again, I want to emphasize that this is going to be broader than that, and the input is going to be broader than that.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Schlegel?
Thank you, Mayor Cersei. Mr. Kelly, I really appreciate your commitment to paradigm shifting when it comes to community engagement, and you've made that clear in other things that you've done since coming on board. I should say Director Kelly, sorry. Often we do have a sense, and I've been in conversations recently looking at the rent stabilization review coming up, where it's saying, how can we get outside of the box? How can we confirm or figure out how to get different outcomes with community engagement in that process? And it's very hard for people to see, well, how does it go different? I mean, I've been engaged in public processes for my whole adult life, and so often it's like, well, you basically have a situation where you do intermittent communication and invitation, and then you see who turns up. And it seems to me like the paradigm shift here is going to engagement not as intermittent communication and invitation, to engagement as relationships. So I guess I have two questions that come out of that. The first is that if we're talking about a new engagement approach that is building like proactive relationships, as you were discussing a few minutes ago, how do we keep the structure of all that fluid? Because organizations come, organizations go, new people move in, move out, people get activated, people get tired. And so how do we not create a kind of ossified structure of people who maybe they're so tightly involved that they're a little co-opted, or they're maybe they have conflicts of interest, maybe they're going after grants and things, and also then other people being just locked out because they didn't get into this a few years earlier or something. And related to that, then, I guess my deeper question, and I think some of my colleagues have been asking this, is how are you ensuring that the core team is getting the most out of this academy process, if at the front end there's still an assumption that it's going to result in a community connectors program? I know you alluded to how that could be residents who are identified in multifamily buildings, it could be leaders of organizations, but what if it's something entirely different, that the academy results in saying, oh, for our community, no, we're going to use skywriters, airplanes, I'm just joking around, but what is it, until we talk to the people and learn their needs, how do we know that community connector as the concept is still viable 3-4 years down the road from when it first was conceived of?
Yeah. Gonna first address the first part of the question, and could you remind me?
The first part of the question was, given that organizations come and go, people move in, move out, get activated, get tired, how do you perceive that this structure isn't going to become ossified almost as soon as it's created?
Right, and that's the important part of taking your time and having a really thoughtful and guided process where we're able to build the structure and a framework that is sustainable. Sustainability is really the key term there. You want it to be able to last not just a couple years, and for example, if we were to just have something that was to deal with the epidemic, and we're not built then for the next phase, that's that's not sustainable. So the goal of this process is to be able to have sustainable framework that is able to adapt with whatever comes and goes in the city. And that's why I think, you know, there's a benefit to a 12-month process where you are really meticulously looking at the community needs and what organizations are out there, what their needs are, and how we can best support them as a city. So it's not a clear-cut answer, and it's something that I think a lot of communities across the country are contending with right now, but it's something that we need to work through and be really clear in identifying how do we build this sustainable. So it's something we're thinking about, but the answer is not entirely clear yet, but that's what we want to get to.
Great, thank you so much. Ryan, real quick, because I know that this conversation has gone over about like 10 minutes. Can you go back to the slide 6 with the team composition? I have a question about that.
Yeah.
You know, individuals aside, it looks as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the folks here represent different stakeholder groups. I mean, you have Mariama, who works a lot with tenants.
Yep.
You have Callista that works with businesses, particularly a lot of our immigrant business owners. Wendy and Adrian, you know, are tag teaming the nonprofit space in terms of the Providers Council. Was that, you know, in terms of identifying, and then of course you and Christine would have a handle on city and being able to speak to that. Was there a desire to make sure that you had different stakeholder groups or individuals that could perhaps speak for and engage with different types of groups in the city?
Yeah, that's the goal, and you know, different perspectives that reach those different populations. Now, you know, ideally you want to be able to bring in as many people as possible, but if you can have those different perspectives that reach those different stakeholder groups, like you said, that's a benefit in having a smaller group and being able to have those different perspectives. Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight that for my colleagues because that was something that kind of stood out for me. Can you go to the 12-month process? I do want to make sure that I'm clear on something. So when you were speaking, you said implementation and observation would be from April until July.
Yeah.
Is that like a pilot, or are you all going to be charged with actually rolling something out, you know, as part of the NLC program?
So I think it depends on the community. For us, we might be ready to roll out a pilot. We might be ready to try and implement something. When we came to NLC, I presented a really, you know, I presented our vision for the Community Connectors program. So it could be that we're ready to implement this Community Connectors program, and kind of going along to Councilmember Schlegel's other question, it could be that we're ready to address Community Connectors and we're rolling that out. We could, through these conversations, determine that the community needs are different and go either, you know, beyond what the Community Connectors are. So we can still address what's the Community Connectors program, but maybe we're addressing something broader too. But our goal really is to be able to implement something that is effective for what we need right now.
Okay, and so I bring that up because it becomes a matter of timing, right? So if we're saying it's going to be a year, right? We're not necessarily talking about a calendar year, and so I do think that's important. We are talking about a fiscal year. So this fiscal year that we are in right now ends at the end of June, right? And so if we do not fully implement the Community Connectors program this fiscal year, what we're saying is the money would need to roll over to the next fiscal year, which would mean doing something in July. So I just want to make sure, because I hear people saying a year delay in terms of it, and it is technically like, I guess, so to speak, a calendar year from when we put it in the budget. But it may not necessarily be the case that we are, you know, provided because we got an election. But if we're all back here this time next year, that we would be in the same place. It seems like, based on this map out here, that you all are hoping, all things considered, best case scenario, to be ready to roll out at least a pilot of some sort come April.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that that point is clear for folks, because that was something that seemed that we were saying a year, but what we were really talking about is moving this in terms of the fiscal year, and what your outline here gives the impression that we would be perhaps have rolled out a pilot or something, best case scenario, and have closed out the NLC training by the end of September. So fingers crossed, best case, we've done something. We've gotten feedback from NLC about what we've done, and then we could have a separate conversation around whether or not we want to, you know, expand, broaden, or continue to fund and support an effort like that going forward. And I just do want to remind my colleagues that I understand everybody wants to move fast and now. I will say over the years, I've seen a number of efforts that we've done in terms of community engagement, platforms purchased, consultants purchased, hired, and at the end of the day, we do something, we get a report, or we buy something and we put it on the website, and then if our staff don't have the capacity or the technical capability to sustain something like that or to improve upon it, then it quite frankly becomes wasted funds. So I do want to appreciate Director Kelly and the group for trying to think in a more holistic, systemic way, so that we can really try to make sure that we're embedding some of the lessons learned in terms of how we're engaging the community going forward. It's not like a program, it's a program, but it's more like, how do we completely transform the way we engage so that we have a system in place that stands beyond the possibility of having to fund $150,000, $200,000 a year.
That was much better said than I did.
That's why I get paid the big bucks. All right. Well, thank you so much, Director Kelly, for this update. And just as a reminder, because of, as you could tell from the conversation that we've just had, I do appreciate staff working to put together a resolution for us to discuss and kind of make sure that we're clearly communicating to staff what it is that we're hoping to achieve through this process and outlining next steps. So if you do have additional questions, please feel free to follow up with Director Kelly directly.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all so much. All right. Code amendment, use of the seal or logo. You're not done.
That was you going off.
That was a false. That was a false clap. Is there a document that needs to be? Yeah. Do we need?
There's no presentation on this one.
Oh, do I need one?
It's
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So now we are going toward the code amendment for the regarding the city logo and city seal. So the purpose that we are bringing this to the table today is really to help codify the use of the city seal and city logo. It's not something that we've had previously cemented, and now we're just really trying to safeguard, those official city emblems and be able to kind of delineate a process of, when a community organization reaches out, hey, can we use your city logo and on a flyer? This is our process, and it's now codified as well. So that's really the purpose of it, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you so much. And so one question that I do have because I believe this might have come up. Gosh, Councilmember Hansak, I feel like it was one of. Yeah, it was like a year or two ago. So, at what stage? Because I know, and forgive me, because my brain is slowly leaving the building. At what stage of the process, because I know that we have worked to try to streamline how, like, that point of entry for groups that want to have events and partner. At what point are we making, and the code amendment is clear, but at what point in that process do we make it very clear to partners, like, okay, here are the rules regarding using our seal and logo. This is what needs to happen in order for that to happen, in addition to, do you need public works? Do you need us to close streets? That kind of thing.
Yes, so it's right at the beginning. As part of that streamlined process, there's the community outreach and events webpage and form that they have to fill out. And one of the first things they have to do is say, do you want to use a city code, a city logo? And then that'll be passed on to me. And I will then, through now what this process will delineate, be able to say, okay, this is a proper use of the city logo, city seal. So it's right at the beginning.
Okay, and so we do review what they ultimately plan to use as the flyer with the seal. It's not that we just give them a blank check and then they have us in some weird.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that's the purpose, so to have that kind of protection.
In code. Excellent. Thank you so much. Councilmember Hanzak?
So in that same vein, the example I'm thinking of is when we had subcontractors. So we had, for example, we have our business associations that might be implementing an event, let's say, and some of them were quicker to use the logo if they had a contract and used some of our funds versus if we paid for, let's say, the vast majority of a particular event. And it wasn't always clear, I think, at that time whether they were even coming to the city to say, hey, in this instance, can we use the logo? So I'm still not sure if I get what that process would look like. Are you saying that it'll be front-ended in their contract for everything that they do, or for each time that they use the logo, even a subcontractor will need to reach out to you? Because I think that's really important.
So yes, so there are some of these business associations, like you mentioned, have in their contracts that they're able to use the city logo. We're asking that no matter what organization you are, so that we have a consistent process throughout, that they reach out, fill out this form so that we know as a city what we need. And then so they fill out the form, we determine their needs, and then every organization, no matter if it's part of that contract or not, will have to go through it and be approved.
So as I hear you, I just want to make sure so this happens again. Subcontractors of any kind, even if it's already written in their contract, because my recollection is, for the moment, all of those subcontracts are pretty generic, because I've read the language.
Yes.
It's
And,
super generic.
Yeah, and that of course will help determine, what we do approve, but it's
Okay.
just,
Then you have a process.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Hanzak. Councilmember DeBala?
Yeah, thanks. This is useful. Probably should have done it a while ago. I'm looking at what may or may be a gray area. So official use by the city and authorized representatives. So authorized representatives is folks that are outside of the city government.
Yes.
What about, how does this treat uses that are inappropriate by folks who are within the city government, either staff or council or committees?
And there is some language to that
I
in
missed
the I believe it's in the ordinance, but at least in
there
the
already
definitely
is.
in the administrative regulations that we will be providing afterwards, there will be some laid out what are the proper uses, but I believe it's in the ordinance as well.
Okay, I'm not seeing it.
So like, for
I'll
example,
look
city
again.
elections, using the
Yes,
logo
for example, city
yes.
elections.
Yes. So that's laid out and that's covered, and I believe it's in the ordinance.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Schlegel?
I just had two sort of technical questions. One is that the custodian is designated as the director of communications. If the director of communications is not available and there's like an urgent need for approval, is there going to be someone who's always known to be the designee?
Yes, and again, my apologies for not knowing the exact language, but I believe there is language for designee. And if not, then it would be the next designated, and it would fall to the city manager's office.
Okay, yeah, I don't see it in the language as right now, so maybe that would
A
be
good revision,
good
yeah.
edit. And the other question was, what about a carve out for journalism? For example, if there was a news article that incorporated the city logo, would that news organization then be told, oh, you need to get our permission if they were just reporting on something that Tacoma Park was doing? I'm wondering how that works.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I think we would have to talk to city attorney on that.
I'm sorry, I just want to see whether or not there's any city staff that have any.
I would just say, we'll talk to the city attorney about that and take a look at it and come back with more information about that.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Landman?
Yeah, I just have one question. The police department has a lot of stuff with logos on it, but they seem to have like a variation on our City of Tacoma Park logo. Is their material considered covered by this ordinance? Because they
Yeah.
also, have okay.
Yes, so there's in the ordinance it covers both the city logo and the sub logos. So that includes the Tacoma Park Police Department.
Okay, Councilmember Honzak?
Yeah, I've neglected to ask, is our city logo copyrighted? Is that even possible? Okay.
We'll get
And
back
I'm
to you.
asking
Yeah,
that because I'm also thinking about the flag, but I'm thinking about how I've seen, I won't name the shops, in at least one shop where there's like a very slight variation on our logo being sold in the form of T-shirts. And occurred to me that even with our city flag, which very few people know what that looks like even, but like, is that even something that someone can pick up and replicate on their own and sell, or like, does anybody know? And if we don't know that, we can look it up. It seems like it might be something that we need to clarify perhaps in a resolution like that.
We'll reach out to our city attorney and check with them.
Okay. All right, great, thank you so much.
That did raise a question about the flag, actually. The flag is not, you can't do this with a flag. A person could reproduce our flag, I assume, if they wanted. Right?
There's no specific language in this ordinance about the city flag.
We'll review with our city attorney, and if we need to add it, we will. So yeah, we don't have an answer at the moment.
Yep, because I wouldn't think a flag would be considered a logo. That's typically different, but we could definitely follow up with the city attorney. All right, not seeing any additional lights. Thank you, City Clerk.
I have one thought, that given that we have some things to follow up on, maybe we should delay the first reading to give us additional time. We had first reading scheduled for next week, so maybe we should delay that a week to give us time to answer all the questions that have come up.
Yep, that's fine. We can give it a bye. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, we are moving to our last work session this evening. And this discussion, thank you, is the continuation of the noise ordinance requirements. And I'll turn things over to our work group. But I do want to encourage us to have the first decision be about how we want to proceed in terms of the noise control board. I know that there's been, and it was proposed by Councilmember Gilbert, modifications to the noise or potential modifications to the noise ordinance related to other matters, particularly multifamily dwelling noise. But I would encourage us tonight to stick to providing the working group with the necessary feedback in terms of so that they can move forward with next steps regarding the noise control board itself. And then I will work with the working group to make sure that we're able to bring that item back before council in the appropriate manner, as well as scheduling discussions regarding some of the other noise ordinance matters that have come up through the course of the discussion. So with that, I will turn things over to the working group on committees. And I don't know who wants to.
I guess I can start. I guess we need to try to figure out where we left off last week, and I think a lot of the conversation was on the challenges of the noise board, and I know there was some conversation amongst us this week about whether or not we should convene with the noise board, or whether or not we should have have COLTA convene as a noise board, and there were some other options that were on the table. So at this juncture, I think we should probably continue with that conversation and get some opinions about, how we feel about the noise board.
Yeah.
And
So if it would be helpful, I can kick us off in terms of going through my thoughts about at least the options that were provided. Or at least the ones that I don't like. Let me just do that. There's some that could be still on the table, and we could be creative. And there's some that I'm not a fan of. In terms of option B, an existing committee or board, I have some hesitancy with that. I know that COLTA is a quasi-judicial board, but I feel like their charge is very different, and to expand it in this way, to me, especially because it's a pretty decent, heavily used committee, I think could just be too much, and I don't immediately know of another committee that has some quasi-judicial components that would make sense for them to deal with noise. So that is one that I'm not a fan of. Option C, designate the city council as the noise board.
Point of order, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Could we maybe have a show of hands and see who agrees with you on what, as we go through these? Because
Yeah,
there might be.
they might be easy. All right, awesome. All right. Yeah. Okay. So I'm leaving A on the table.
Let's go through the ones that you know.
Yeah, the ones that I'm like, now.
You said COLTA, we can.
I said that the option B, deputize an existing city committee board, and the one
COLTA
option
in
was
particular,
COLTA.
Yeah.
All those.
I have a suggestion for an alternate for option B.
A different board? And what would be that suggestion?
Well, it isn't a board, but I wondered about the ability to tap past council members. Thinking that covers the different wards, folks that have been in this kind of a position, understand some of this stuff, but it would not be an ongoing commitment. It would be an as-is, and maybe if we needed a couple people reaching out to those and see who could sign up and do that.
Point of order, Mayor.
Councilmember.
May I suggest a different process? May I suggest that we have each member, there are 4 of you who are not on our subcommittee, so we've all spoken at length. If maybe you walk through first the things that you find really not, and lay that out, and then go through. Each 4 person can kind of, and then we can have more of a dialogue after that.
Yep,
I think
sure.
that will be more efficient. Does that sound okay?
Awesome.
Yes? Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep going through the way I was? All right. But I will say, you know, in response to Councilmember Westlake, even former council members would need rules. And so that would mean that we are basically creating the noise control board, but populating it with former council members, which in my view would be option A. And we don't want to get into why I think that could potentially be challenging. The option C, designate the city council as the noise board. I'm not a fan of that option. I have some concerns. One, in terms of our capacity. 2, in terms of the politicalization of something like this. I think that it is in our best interest as a council to stay at arm's length. And so if in terms of being as objective and arm's length as we can be in these kinds of matters, because the fact of the matter is, you know, ensuring that whatever the decision is made by the board would also ultimately fall to the council in some capacity through the city management or staff. I think that that's just double dipping. So I would actually recommend not moving forward with that item. The option D, defer action pending ordinance revision. I'm going to keep that one on the table because I feel like this is an add-on to other options, so I don't want to immediately say no to that one. And I think that because option A, reconstitute the noise board, option D, defer action pending ordinance revision, and option E, dissolve the noise control board permanently, all relate to one another in some way, right? So in my mind, if we decide to permanently dissolve the noise control board, and then absorb it within the city, which I'm not exactly sure. That would be a question for city staff, whether or not we would have the capacity to be able to adjudicate these kind of matters objectively with current staff capacity. That's something I don't know. But I do think that if we were to, in either option, dissolve the noise control board permanently, we would have to come up with some alternative, which would require us to modify the ordinance to make sure that we're making it very clear to residents who have these kinds of issues what's the process that they would need to follow. So that, in my mind, would be option D. So again, I am oversimplifying this. I am grouping it in have the noise board, don't have the noise board, and modify the ordinance to come up with an either getting rid of the requirement for adjudication through the noise board or coming up with some other approach for staff to absorb the function. Is kind of where I'm leaning, but I could be an outlier. Councilmember DeBala.
Thanks. So in that model, I'll go through the 5 options. But I want to clarify first. Right now, we have a noise ordinance that has a decibel level that's covered by staff. And so what we're talking about here is anything
Nuisance.
below that, which is perceived as a nuisance. Okay, just making sure I got that right. And I do think the renters issue is important, and I agree, let's not do that right now because it is somewhat separate. So in all fairness to those who developed these options, I did work on this a couple times already. So my views haven't changed a whole lot. I do not think we should reconstitute the Noise Control Board for all the reasons that it didn't work the first time. I do not think that asking COLTA to do it is a great idea either. I do not think that asking the city council to do it is a great idea, which leaves me with D. And what I don't like about D is defer action. I think D is find another solution and revise the ordinance to meet that. I like the mediation. I like the mediation in any of several forms, either the outside mediator group or potentially some, I don't think that asking city staff to do that is going to work, but maybe. I'm not sure we asked them. And then I think that once we have another solution, we should dissolve the Noise Control Board on paper, and probably should have done by now. So in summary, that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala.
Making up for the lost time.
You know? Anyone else want to share their thoughts? Councilmember Landman.
I think that we should not have a noise control board. It's, and that we should substitute the use of existing mechanisms that have been established at a county level, because having locally established bodies that are used so infrequently is onerous and for everybody concerned. And it also, based on our experience in the Committee of Committees and the work that you guys did when you abolished the committee that I served on, deeply offending me, and no, I'm kidding, but that it offends people who serve on committees to never be called upon. So we know from our experience that having a committee languishing is not helpful. So we have mediation services and we have administrative law judge or equivalent services that we can call on from the county. So I believe that we would be better served by addressing the concerns that were rightly identified by Councilmember Gilbert in feeling that the ordinance is not being properly administered or implemented in multifamily buildings so that it can be useful there. Solve that problem and then abolish the noise control board and establish a tiered system of making sure that problems can be properly enforced against and then appealed through a process of mediation if the person who's complained against wants to have mediation, or else go straight to an administrative law judge type of a process. That would be my preference. And I shared with the council a brief assessment of whether we actually do have or don't have a deficiency in the current language of the ordinance with respect to multifamily dwellings. And I'm actually not entirely sure that we do have a problem or whether we have a problem in the way that it is being administered. And I would really like to hear Councilmember Gilbert's view on that. But I did wonder whether maybe the requirement that we have a two-party affidavit as a mechanism is the problem, because sometimes having to have another neighbor weigh in with you is a real obstacle for people. So I could imagine that smartphones have come a long way since this ordinance was first written, and that there might be ways for people to provide evidence to the code enforcement team that they couldn't before. That might be a substitute for that sort of two-party affidavit issue that could enable people to prove nuisance noise disturbances without having to get another neighbor to sign on with them. So that would be my suggestion. Abolish the current requirement for a noise control board and substitute reliance on county systems.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. Councilmember Gilbert.
Yeah, it's just a matter of some background information for you all. I did have a meeting with staff in July, and that was Chief of Police, a member of Code Enforcement, Rick Baravecchia. I'm not sure if City Manager DeSpirito, if you were in that meeting. No, I don't think so, okay. But there was some discussion about staff and whether or not they had the capacity to deal with these matters. And the chief didn't feel that the language was adequate that's in the code today. However, Skip, in conversation with our city attorney, he believes that, and I had written a citation many years ago, 2005, I believe it was, to a resident who was violating the noise ordinance and refused to turn his noise down in an apartment building. And unfortunately, on that triplicate form that I still have today in the report, you can't see which code that I cited. Skip believes that I probably cited from, I believe it is 1412-050. And I believe during that meeting that Director McNally was also in the meeting, and he thought that we could cite from that as well. But the chief and I didn't believe that that language is adequate. So the chief would be more comfortable with something that a little bit more specific and more clear, and then he would be more than willing to develop a standard operating procedure with my assistance so that the officers understand where they can cite and how to write the municipal citation. And then there needs to be more discussion about what happens with that citation, where it goes district court, and we can always talk about that. So just for clarity, I believe staff is ready and willing. They've already been responding to these calls for service. They do a wonderful job mediating them. They just don't have, at least in their interpretation and application, the ability to cite violators, again, because of there not being the clarity in the ordinance and being sure that this section applies to them.
The section on the definition of nuisance.
Right.
Okay.
1412-050. B.
And to this point, I talked to the city attorney a couple days ago, and I got a similar more current informal interpretation, that it's not so much the actual words in the ordinance, in the code, as it is the interpretation which suggests some kind of procedure or policy.
So let's continue with getting feedback from folks in terms of the options. And then we can follow up in terms of additional communication we may need from staff to clarify, making sure that we're all clear in terms of staff capacity and what staff would need to be able to absorb this type of function. Councilmember Westlake, did you want to go through? You have to go through the options. We all did it.
No, I think it was 2, 3 of you did.
But there's only 4 that's not on the committee.
Right. Okay. All right. I'm generally in agreement. I'm generally in agreement. If we dissolve the board because of the problems in the past, I would understand that. I also think it would be problematic for city council to be the noise board. I want to take a concern of if this is adding to staff workload very seriously, but I'm not sure what that would be yet. And I agree, I don't want to defer action. I want us to get this wrapped up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a great discussion, and there's one thing that's not in the attachments that I think is significant, which is that when you look at our ordinance, the Noise Control Board not only adjudicates these two-party nuisance complaints, but it also exists to advise the council on noise-related matters. And so I am wondering whether, and I'm proposing, I guess, that there could be an argument for reconstituting a noise control board on a short-term basis, because we have a number of questions that we feel like we're on the cusp of being able to answer, but are we really? We've got a question about whether we could return the enforcement to the county. How does the county do dwelling-to-dwelling complaints? Return the adjudication to the county. And how does the county adjudicate dwelling-to-dwelling complaints? Is that something we'd be comfortable with? I don't know the answer right now. So given that there are several questions out there, the ordinance says have a noise control board advise you on these matters. And so we could see if we could get 7 residents with an interest in taking a look at the identified issues we have, and we could task them with bringing back answers.
Councilmember Schlegel, I guess my concern with that approach is it seems like the questions that are outstanding are things that, with the help of staff, we could organize, have the county to provide us with some information regarding their process, information regarding whether or not, if we were to choose to go down the path of just saying, hey, we're county residents too, our residents, use the county process, and we make them aware that that's what we want to do, that could happen perhaps even faster than, as long as there's consensus amongst council, once we get that information and there's consensus, then marketing for a committee, getting them stood up, getting them organized enough to understand what it is that we're looking for, giving them time to write something up and present back to us. I just think that I've seen those kinds of processes take months to just market and get people on board. I don't think that that is necessarily the fastest option if the goal is to just get a group together to advise us on these core points, which definitely correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like some are leaning towards dissolving the noise board, but working with staff to identify what capacity, it seems like the capacity might exist, but what additional clarification in the code would be necessary in order for them to write up nuisance complaints in a way that's appropriate. And then we also can follow up with the county to see about the mediation process that they have in place as it relates to noise and whether or not we can piggyback off of that. And if both of those things come back as yes, then, and we want to do one, both, or, we would make sure that we're working with the city attorney to modify the noise ordinance section of the code to eliminate the board, modify the adjudication process to clarify what the police department would do, but also include aspects of the county if that's what we want to do. And then if we need additional clarification as it relates to multifamily housing dwelling, we knock all of that out in when we go through the process of modifying the ordinance for the purpose of the board. Now, I know I could be kind of going through that pretty quick, but it seems to me like that could actually be more expedient than standing up a board. Councilmember Honzak?
I think I generally concur with what the mayor has just shared. Respectfully, Councilmember Schlegel, I know that one of the issues we have before us is that there is, in fact, an active noise complaint, at least one, right? And we were looking for, as a subcommittee, we were looking for one of our short-term solutions. I think it is actually really important that we do not bounce this back, the decision-making aspect of this, to a noise board. And the reason is because, in simple terms, several prior councils have gone through a whole array of processes that to me were actually based very importantly on the democratic process itself, and having gone through different votes across the city for the council members themselves, and then constituting the public safety committee and weighing in on how that related to committee selection and how it related to noise issues writ large in our city and how those things are decided upon. And so I think that where we have arrived at now is that we're looking for something that's going to balance out some of those issues. So that would make me very uncomfortable to go back to the board advising us, partially too, because I think they might get really, really demoralized if they got constituted and then they advised us something and then we took a different step. And I think that could very well happen, given how hard this has been even for the council to solve. So I think my concern is that this is helpful guidance for our subcommittee, but I'm feeling like we're landing now on that, mediation we've agreed for quite some time looks like a promising pathway as a piece of the solution, but it's that other part. I mean, are we talking about, when you can't do mediation, are we talking about it falling potentially on staff who we know already feel, like they've got a lot? And so who within the staff, and are we talking about a single department? That'd be one question, and I haven't felt like I had clarity on that, except that I don't know that the staff is ready for that. And then, Councilmember Landman, you suggested, getting someone, an administrative law judge. I have no idea, how difficult that is, whether that costs money, then who pays, and that kind of thing. But I do think it's worth reminding all of us that unless we're talking about maybe noise issues coming from our multifamily buildings, that we're probably talking about a pretty rare situation, like once a year. So I'm not sure, that could play a role in whether or not any of us can imagine this happening. But if we lump in multifamily building noise situations, we might be actually talking about something quite a lot bigger. So I'm not sure what to do with that piece, but we could get to that later if we think we can deal with where we're at right now without the multifamily piece.
Okay, Councilmember DeBala?
Yeah, I was just going to ask two questions. One, last week I asked, and I didn't identify who was supposed to do it, so no wonder it didn't happen. Who would be in the best position to find out if the noise complaint from 2023 is still relevant? Who received it, and who can inquire as to whether the two-party complaint has been resolved because somebody moved or because the situation changed, or?
I have the answer on that, which is that when I recollected it more clearly, there were a number of residents who signed a two-party noise complaint,
Right.
maybe 10 or 12. And then when they when they contacted you, City Clerk Carpenter, you said, you could submit this to me, however, there is no noise control board at this time. So officially speaking, it's on someone's side table by their front door right now, but it hasn't been submitted. Yeah.
Okay. So,
Second, okay, go ahead.
I don't know, in terms of whether the noise issue is resolved, I have not heard that it is resolved, but I've, so, yeah.
okay. So even though there are residents that might have wanted to submit, it's not that we currently have a stack of noise complaints that's waiting on adjudication. Okay.
The second question had to do with adjudication. So the county has a mediation process. We talked to them for two-party complaints. We talked to them about it the last time round. That is done by county staff, not by a county board. And because, if I recall, at that time, because their decibel levels were a little different from ours, they were reluctant to take on a city, and because we have a separate noise ordinance. I understood that to be different from what Councilmember Landman was talking about with administrative judges, but maybe I didn't understand completely what you said. And it seems to me like someone should check with them again, the county mediation folks. County staff.
I've suggested that that the county does have a system that of making use of retired administrative law judges to preside over administrative proceedings
so that
of this
is a
kind.
separate thing.
Yeah, and that they
good
use, it came up in the context of the of the Police Accountability Act, and there are, you know, retired ALJs who do stuff like this for, you know, a modest hourly fee of $200 an hour. Apparently, that's what it is for the Police Accountability Act anyway, in the statute. So I'm figuring that it costs something like that. And there is a mediation program at the county available also, that I think that they use volunteer-trained mediators for that. So I had proposed that we, you know, that we have a system whereby people, if we have complaints here and there are code enforcement mechanisms that we have, that there be, you know, a escalating process whereby when you get to a certain point, it gets a, you know, a penalty that is sufficient that if the person doesn't want to pay it, they can ask for mediation, or if they don't want to go through mediation, goes directly to an administrative law judge, and then there you have something of due process there. But, you know, that's, we could also simply decide that we're going to use whatever process the county has and adopt that as our own. If there's something that's wrong with that, we, you know, other than it's not ours, we decide that we have to be different. But, you know, if we're going to be using their mediation and ALJ processes, then maybe the cleanest and neatest thing would be to look at theirs, make sure it's okay, and decide we're going to go that route, and just mimic it. I didn't consider that when I commented on ours, but it's something I could take a look at if you want.
Thank you, Councilmember Lamb and Councilmember Schlegel.
Does anyone know the history of why we moved away from the county ordinance in, I think, 2012?
We moved away from the county ordinance in 2000 or
Oh,
2001.
oh yeah, sorry, I had
Long
the year
ago.
way off.
We opted out of the county ordinance and adopted our own.
And do we remember what the precipitating incidents were for that, or?
I think
anybody?
there were a lot of things going on at that time, but I would have to do research to tell you
Yeah,
exactly
okay.
what.
Because it wouldn't be a decision to be taken lightly, but it sure would simplify things if we just said the county handles noise complaints.
But I do think it's important for us to keep in mind that our decibel levels and other requirements are different, and that would warrant having conversations about not just the aspects of the noise ordinance that we're talking about right now, but also other aspects that would be different between what we have in place and what is in the county.
I do want to note that their decibel levels are more protective than ours, not less, just as it happens. They have more stringent controls, I believe, at nighttime.
Actually, I think it's
Yeah.
the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
It's I'm 95% sure that it's the opposite. I just looked it up, and that was what I got back, unless I didn't do my homework hard enough. Because I was trying to answer the question that Councilmember Schlegel just asked, but I'm sorry, does anyone else? I was trying to ask exactly that question, and I had asked again. I had actually reached out to some previous council members that were on, and you know, I can't claim that I did like super vigorous research, but I wanted to answer that question. And what I came up with was that we had, there was a little bit different. I think that we were basically treating our community like we wanted a little more nuance, I think, in our regulations to be able to have somebody come in and do like a two-party complaint and say, hey, I think our decibel levels were actually a little bit lower, and our regulations were saying we wanted it to be earlier in the evening that it would shut down. I'm pretty sure. And this may actually come up too with construction, I'm thinking, coming up with the Adventist Hospital, for example, site. And I am concerned about some of that stuff going down, and we may need to have a solution. I want to play devil's advocate for just a second, because I've been thinking about this a lot, more than I would like to, and I'm thinking, I initially didn't like the idea of us, the council, being involved in these matters. But at the end of the day, especially if maybe we need to go back and ask that question, Councilmember Landman, if that is correct, that ours are more stringent than the counties, and we wanted more nuance historically, and we've evolved up until now, then I would maybe think of this as kind of a political question on some level, that we are democratically elected by the people across the city, and if we listen to what we think is a reasonable appeal, we're talking about defining the word nuisance, and it only happens, you know, once a year or so. We might have to be willing to lay our political capital on the table and just say, this isn't what we hear here across all of us is, you know, either fairly similar or fairly not similar. I don't know. I mean, I don't love it. I hate it actually, because it could be a single individual's downfall for making a decision. But if it's not us, it'll be the staff. And I don't know who, I mean, somebody's going to be the bad guy or a random judge.
So here's just to kind of get us grounded into a decision. I'm going to ask for a hand vote in terms of who would like to reconstitute the noise board, meaning you want us to recruit for a noise board. Bring it back. Okay?
Well, may I respond to Councilmember Hansek's
I would,
point?
given
Because
that we are near 11 o'clock.
it affects how I would vote on the question you just wanted to vote on.
Go right ahead.
The Noise Control Board doesn't meet as a 7-member body to adjudicate two-party nuisance complaints. It impanels 3 members. So if we chose to do this as a council, we could agree to impanel 3 members who had no relationship geographically to the place where the complaint was occurring. I want to make that point, yeah.
Okay. And again, I'm elected at large, or the mayor is elected at large. So the mayor will never. So I want to just move us in a direction where we can really clearly solidify next steps. So what is before everyone is a vote, particularly on option A, which is recruiting and reconstituting the Noise Control Board. All those in favor of reconstituting the Noise Control Board, let me see your hand. Okay, so it looks like the hand votes show that option A is out. I just want to, just because of the conversation that just happened, let me go see. Hand vote. Folks that are in favor of designating the city council as the noise board.
Madam Mayor, I just want to say, I don't think, we're a legislative body. I don't think we can be an adjudicatory body.
I don't either,
That's my
but
personal opinion.
I agree.
And I agree with Skip. I just think it's wrong.
I agree, but that is why I need, that is why I need hands so we can stop talking about it and postulating about it. We're going to see, because I don't want us talking about the options of the council doing this and spending time on it if it's not feasible. All those in favor of designating the city council as the noise board, raise your hand. So you want the city council to be the noise board? Okay. All right. You're out. Okay? That's a no. So we're not talking about bringing the noise board back. We're not talking about the city council being the noise board. Now, I'm gonna put something on for a hand vote, okay? That we will, dissolve the noise control board. And consider modifications to the noise ordinance that includes mediation and additional, nope, I'm just trying to make sure that we are saying, look, right now, what we want to do, we're going to bring this back, but what we want to do is abolish the noise board and consider modifications to the noise ordinance that may include additional staff function and or mediation.
And/or county.
And/or lots of, and/or county,
and/or county.
which covers both county options.
So staff, remember, there's one item that is unclear from the police in terms of whether or not there are modifications that may need to be made to the code to make it clearer for them in terms of what they may be able to enforce.
Respectfully, Mayor, we haven't voted on option B yet. Could we please do a hand vote on option B before we do that?
So you need us to just say no on deputizing the existing
Or
board?
yes? Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead and say no. Let's just go through all of the options so we can just make
Let's
sure
go ahead
people
and
are
say no.
clear. So the item before is deputize an existing city board as the noise control board. All those in favor?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Or just,
All those in favor. So we got 1, 2, 3. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 that are out. Okay, that's not an option.
Okay.
We are moving forward. So what is left is ordinance revision, which we know we're gonna have to do, and dissolve the noise control board permanently, which we, by default, have decided is the option. So what I'm trying to do right now is just get us to the point where we clearly know what our next steps are. And so that is, we need to, the council is going to consider, the council will dissolve the noise control board
D&E.
and consider modifications to the noise ordinance that may include additional staff function and/or, okay, so again, I'm gonna just bring people back again to what was included in option E, which is what Councilmember Gilbert just discussed, which was, there's currently a little bit of a disconnect in terms of whether or not the current code, as it is written, allows for the police to have the necessary clarity that they need to potentially enforce aspects of nuisance. So the question for staff is, you all need to go back and talk, okay? We need to talk to the city attorney, right? And we will need to, as a purpose of removing the board and making sure that there's necessary clarity, we may need to modify this noise ordinance to accommodate that, right? So when I say additional staff function, it may mean that there are certain sections in this section of the code that we may have to include staff now. I don't know. I haven't gone through it with an eye for what staff needs additional clarity on or what staff may be able to enforce. I don't know. And we're not at a point right now to make that decision. But what I need is for us to say that this is something that we want to look into so that we can come up with a plan for modifying the code.
Code or administrative regulation.
Or administrative regulations, but right now, this is becoming a full paragraph. So, but the long and short is, we want to dissolve the noise control board and modify the ordinance based on either staff, county capacity, or external mediation. And as I see it, that's where we are. And so then what would need to happen is working with staff and folks, we may need to have another work session, which is fine. But we come back with another work session where we actually start addressing some of these questions that were raised in terms of staff needs, in terms of what the county currently has available and differences between our noise ordinance and what they have in place. And then also whether or not there's a real possibility that we just have a on-call mediator that through professional services that we just have on the books. So if something pops up, we just pay per hour, give everybody 2 hours with a mediator that we have on staff. I don't know. But I just think that that's in my mind the next steps. Councilmember Schlegel, your light was first.
Yes. Yeah, with all the unknowns, that's I'm not going to cry over the spilt milk, but that's why I was thinking Noise Control Board could help us out with this process. Could we clarify the proposal you're going to put on the table? I'd like, it bothers me that we have an ordinance on the books that calls for this body to be there and it's not there. So if it's going to be a 2, 3 or more month process before we do anything, could we just vote soon to suspend the Noise Control Board officially so that it's not making a promise we can't keep?
I totally agree. I don't want to delay this. What I want to do is bring this back this month if I can. I do need to follow up with staff of whether or not we need a bye week to bring back another work session on this topic so that we can make sure that everybody has the background information that we need in terms of thinking through what modifications to the code we may want to make. But I don't want to delay this thing. And the only reason why I'm not moving, the Noise Control Board is established through the ordinance or through the code. So we would have to suspend, it's already suspended through the prior resolution that the council provided. But to eliminate it would require a change to the code, if that makes sense. So that older resolution, we de facto suspended it after the terms ended. So we don't necessarily need to do another resolution suspending. What we do need to do is make sure that we are very clear in the code that it doesn't exist anymore. Councilmember Landman?
I followed what you were saying earlier. At first, I thought you were saying that we needed to modify to provide for, I think you were just talking about having staff do this, not actually modify it to provide for additional staff.
Right.
But I just want clarification on whether you are saying that we would have mediation be the end of the line, or whether we would have mediation with the possibility of adjudication in the event that mediation is either unsuccessful or, that the parties reject mediation in favor of, binding arbitration or else just adjudication. Because, mediation is usually not the end of the road, for party, yeah.
We don't know that yet. I think that's why I'm proposing we just bring this back, but it's a little bit more focused in terms of the work session. Because, once we learn more about the county ins and outs of what may be available, or what we may be able to tap into or not, or how we ultimately, or how they do it in terms of the adjudication with the mediation, we may want to mirror that piece, but maybe bring in our own mediators to do it. I don't know. But that's why I'm thinking we need to have another work session to kind of work through some of that.
So are we, I think, I want to make sure if we understand each other, so maybe we're being clear to the staff, we want to examine the possibility of whether it makes sense for us to mirror the county's program. We're not going to assume that's the case, but we want to evaluate the possibility that that would work for us.
Right.
Okay.
Councilmember Honzak.
I just wanted to be clear that it was my understanding going into this work session that the main goal was to eliminate certain options, not to decide that, exactly precisely what's next. So I think we've successfully eliminated some options. We're clear that we're going to dissolve the Norms Board, and that's really helpful for if the subcommittee is going to take this forward. I don't think we'll accomplish as much in a work session as people will behind the scenes answering some of those questions. And then if there's a there, then we could lay those out for people.
I would actually disagree with that
Okay.
point, because I think that while having those separate conversations have been useful to get us to this point, I think it would be very beneficial for all members of council to be privy to the feedback that staff is providing regarding process, and privy to information that is relevant to the county process, in order for us to be able to make sure we're clear on what modifications to the code are necessary.
Are we therefore asking the staff to do that research on our behalf? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's where we are.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was a possibility.
Yep, it's out of the committee. You all have done your job. We now have an approach. Now we're in the point of modifying our code or modifying an ordinance, which it's typically when everyone kind of gets to hear the same information at the same time in order for us to be able to facilitate discussion regarding the modifications. Councilmember DeBala.
Thank you. The last time around, the committee did, the working group did answered some of these detailed questions and brought back to the council. And if staff feels that they need help on this, since I've already done it once, I'd be happy to help again.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. I think we're at a point now where we can rely on staff to kind of help us move this forward. City Clerk.
I would just suggest not next week, not the week after, maybe 2 by
Two
weeks.
2 weeks. Okay.
Yeah,
Yep, we can do that.
Can I,
Councilmember Honzak.
may I reflect back what I hear are the options? One would be mirror the county process, whatever that is. 2 would be mediation through the Conflict Resolution Center potentially, because that's the only partner we know of, I think. And then an arbitration process or an administrative judge, AKA somebody else who's like hired to do that. Or 3 would be mediation through Conflict Resolution Center and then to city staff. Are there other options that I've missed? Aren't those the 3 sort of things we're looking at here?
Well, I think what we're trying to do right now is get the information regarding all 3 buckets.
Right.
So that we could determine
Right,
what
but are those the
process.
3 buckets,
Yeah.
I guess is my question.
think
I just
so.
want to make sure we are clear on the 3 buckets. Okay, thank you.
And then is the 4th one determining whether the code in fact is sufficient to deal with
Correct.
dwelling to dwelling.
Councilmember Schlegel.
This is good. We've arrived. It just seems like it would be good for us to try to, maybe not tonight, but just state what is the objective of this ordinance, to make sure, are we changing the objective of it in some way, or are we just trying to make sure that a revised ordinance meets the objectives that were put forth back in the early 2000s? Because otherwise, we could end up reopening a whole lot of other questions about decibel limits, and maybe we want to, maybe some people want to, we just need to be clear, I think, on what the objective of this upcoming revisiting process is going to be.
Great, thank you. All right, well, we are at time for this discussion. We're hitting 11 o'clock. Councilmember DeBala.
I happen to have the noise ordinance.
I think that's something we can reserve for the next
Okay.
work session
Great.
on this matter. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you all so much. I think we're done for this evening. Everybody have a wonderful night.
Thank you.